Good morning. Good morning.
But anyway,
I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the Migratory Birds and Waterfowl. And I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. At this time, we'll turn it over to Margot Minkler for the roll call.
Good morning. I'm going to do a roll call for committee members present for the Migratory Birds and Waterfowl Committee. Committee Chair, John Coley.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair, Wes Seegers. Committee Member David Hoyle. Committee Member Kelly Davis. Here. Committee Member Landon Zimmer. Committee Member John Alexander.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Doug Howe with an update on swan mortality event, Mattamuskeet.
thanks, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. We'll begin this morning with just an update on a recent mortality event at Mattamuskeet National Wildlife Refuge involving tundra swans. So what's happened? On February 10th, I got a call from the refuge manager informing me that there was 15 or so dead swans around one of the impoundments at the lake, and that they had collected two freshly dead carcasses and sent those to the National Wildlife Health Center for diagnostic analysis to see why those birds died. So just for those that aren't as familiar with Lake Mattamuskeet, that map on the left, you'll see that mortality event occurred just east of the Highway 94 causeway as you enter the refuge from the highway. Specifically, it was occurring within what they termed the MI4 impoundment. That's the impoundment that the public first sees as they enter the refuge. Unlike many other areas on the refuge, that refuge is designed for public viewing opportunities. It has a observation deck and also has a road that surrounds the perimeter of the impoundment. So it's quite in the public eye. And those swans that were submitted came back from the National Wildlife Health Center, and the analysis indicated that those two swans died from twice the lethal dose of lead ingestion. Which means with that level of lead ingestion, those birds probably die within 24 to 48 hours. So in the interim between when those swans were sent and we received the diagnostic results, we continued to see accelerated mortality in tundra swans in that impoundment. These birds would typically crawl up on the bank of the impoundment and just sit there. They'd crawl up on the road and not be able to get out of the way of vehicles. I went down there and the refuge manager and I did a quick, ride around the impoundment, and we estimated probably at that time, over a month, there were probably at least 200 swans that had died or were in the process of dying. And unlike those first two swans they sent in, these swans typically were just in various stages of dying. Lead ingestion, basically what it does is it shuts down the smooth muscles of the digestive system. So basically birds just typically die. They starve to death. They can eat, but they can't process the food. So these birds, these 200 I'm talking about that were in the process, but either dead or in the process of dying, were likely dying over a 2-week period. So it was a very extended time of death as opposed to the two birds they initially sent in. We were also asked around March 20th if we could send staff to assist the refuge with trying to get these carcasses, for the most part out of the public eye. And then we wanted to also collect some additional samples for analyses just to make sure that what we sent in early March, we're seeing the same thing. So we did that. We got an airboat down there, went around and collected basically everything we could get our hands on that were either dead or in the process of dying. Those came back also is due to lead ingestion. And by, I'd say April 1st, I think the estimate was, my estimate anyway, was at least 400 swans dead down there, and maybe more actually. And I did send down my assistant on Monday just to follow up. There were also probably about 50 swans left in that impoundment in the same process of either dead or dying. So it's a pretty significant event. That impoundment was once hunted. So, you know, even though lead shot was banned in 92, I believe, that impoundment was hunted back in the 60s and 70s. So, you know, the assumption was that the source of lead exposure was lead shot deposition from hunting. In discussions with the refuge manager, the district biologist and I, you know, asked if there were any mechanical actions that had been implemented, you know, fairly recently, and he told us that they had dissed the impoundment, which is not uncommon management practice down there, but they had also cleaned out some of the interior ditches of sediment. And these are deep ditches. And what was interesting to us, we found no mortality in ducks, although there weren't a lot of ducks there, you know, at this time. There were still, you know, several hundred shovelers and various other ducks. But we found no mortality in ducks, which suggested to us, just based upon the way swans feed, that lead was deeper in the substrate and maybe out of the reach of ducks as opposed to tundra swans. In terms of next steps, you know, we've had discussions in past years about lead. We've had this occur, not to this extent, before, back in 2016, and at that time we recommended that maybe core sampling that impoundment pretty intensively to understand where that lead's coming from, how deep it is in the substrate would be something that would be a good thing to do. So my understanding is the refuge does have plans this summer to do that. You know, what do you do when you find out how deep it is or where it is? Kind of limited. I mean, so really, you know, based upon the results of that survey, you know, the only management action that may need to be implemented, maybe just not flood it. That's, like I said, there's not a lot to do. We'll continue to follow up on this event and give you periodic updates on what is found based upon these core sampling this summer. So that's basically all I had with that. I've certainly entertained any questions. Yes, sir.
When they clean the interior ditches, do they just throw the spoils back in the
My
impoundment?
understanding, yeah, they just went in just like you would in the V ditch on a farm field and just threw it out to the side. So that's an area that certainly would be an area we'd want to sample, you know, pretty heavily for lead shot.
And is that the first time since 92, or the first time in a long time we've cleaned out those interior ditches?
They diss the impoundment very regularly every few years, but in terms of doing that to the ditches, I'm not sure they've done that in a while, but I'd have to ask.
And who is they? Is that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife?
The refuge, yes. Yeah, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
So would before any other ditches that are in this same state, is that where you would go in and before anybody cleans out more ditches and test to see?
Yes, the
There's
idea would
lead
be to do no more disking, no more cleaning of ditches until that area was core sampled to understand how much lead is in there and actually where it's deposited within the impoundment, and then how deep in the substrate that actually is.
That's very, I mean, by the nature of draining an impoundment, you're going to pull that lead shot to the ditches every year. It's just continuing to deposit that. I've not thought about at our hunting club, when you clean an interior ditch, maybe you need to treat the spoils differently.
Yeah, because over time, you know, gravity would basically take that lead down in the substrate and keep it, you know, out of the reach of these birds.
Just last thing so we can move on, but has there been any public backlash from this, or is there anything we need to do to educate the public about the mortality of these?
It's a great question, and I'll say this, I'm really thankful this didn't occur in December and January when thousands and thousands of people would be riding around that impoundment and observing this. So I'm not sure what plans the refuge has in terms of public outreach. This happened so quickly, and like I said, luckily there weren't that many people around when it happened. It did make the news. WITN and Wavy News picked it up. But to my knowledge, I'm not sure, other than those response to those news media events, that I just mentioned. I'm not sure that they've done any additional public outreach or not.
Like one quick question. So how much lead does a swan have to ingest for its problem? One,
Say for a duck, maybe 2 pellets. Swan, probably a few more than that, but you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of lead ingestion to cause mortality in water.
Mr. Davis says.
There's been lead poisoning on that refuge. When I moved in 1980, my first day at work was collecting swans from that impoundment. That, like Doug said, those ditches were just like a Dondy almost, so the spoils right along there. Probably what's Mark saying was happened because the unit's been disked before. The 2 blinds that were used in there in the, you know, from the 30s to the 70s, probably, I mean, when you disk it, it doesn't move the lead a lot.
Right.
But the water and all that movement and just like the activity of the swans could, so it could be that it's right along those ditches. That's the problem. It's never turned up really with the disking. The lead poisoning has really, you'd say, Doug, it's decreased remarkably on the refuge over the years since the 80s. As we assume that lead has sort of settled down in the sediment. So this is new. The refuge has gotten a lot of calls. I've gotten quite a few calls, but you know, try not to be sensational about it. Lead poisoning has happened in the past. It's going to happen in the future. And swans are big and white, and it's upsetting to see them sick, but people are really understanding that it was, if it's a result of management, it was with really good intentions that the management was done, and the management yielded excellent waterfowl response. So I think they're continuing to meet about this, and there are some options. You could dike off sections of the impoundment. I mean, it's a wonderful waterfowl viewing impoundment. It gets a lot of bird use to could do some sub-diking in there and not flood the whole thing. So there's some management opportunities, but generally there hasn't been uproar. I think the refuge has done a pretty good job of following what they know. You know, that's what mission biologists have done too, and as have I.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Any other questions for Doug? Thank you, Doug. All right, next up, we have Brad Howard to go over migrant peregrine falcon take from wild for use in falconry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Commissioners. I'll do this relatively quickly. This is our annual allowable take of migrant peregrine falcons for use in falconry. Not a lot of change in this from last year. I think the total allocation for all the flyways was 144 peregrines, juvenile peregrines, of 48 in the Atlantic Flyway, and of those 48, North Carolina has allocated up to 5 birds. Falconers can take the peregrines only east of US 17. And from September 20th through the 20th, you see the standard bullets there of the conditions of the peregrine take for use in falconry. And staff recommends that the commission accept the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's allocation framework and establish the season in 2023 with these exact same stipulations as we've had over previous years.
Any questions for Brad? Do we need to make a motion of that?
This will actually be Exhibit Q tomorrow, and the commission will vote to direct the director to establish this by proclamation, as well as just like the migratory bird seasons. Is that correct, Kyle? Yeah. So I don't know that we need an action out of the committee on this particularly.
Thank you, Brad.
Yes, sir.
How do they trap them?
Sarah, can you comment on that?
Yeah, they have certain traps called ball chauchery traps, and they lure them in with a decoy, and then they entangle their talons, and then they can go up to the bird and capture it. So it doesn't cause any harm to the bird, and if one happens to be banded, they record all the banding information that was unharmed. But they're only allowed to take the bird that's stipulated. Yeah.
Once they take a bird, when they catch the bird, do they sell the bird, or is this a hunter got to do?
Yeah, the falconer has to have all proper licenses and training, And they keep that bird.
So it's not like somebody's doing it and selling it.
No, that wouldn't be legal.
No.
That's my question.
Yep, they have to be properly licensed and trained as falconers to get these.
Any other questions for Brad? Thank you, Brad.
Sure enough, I'll turn it back to
Okay, so
Doug.
we're back over to Doug to go over our migratory game bird season frameworks and staff recommendations.
Okay, so I'll be presenting here in the next 15 or so slides, the 2023-24 staff recommendations for our migratory game bird seasons. Those include our webless and waterfowl seasons, and then our extended falconry seasons. So beginning with your exhibit P3, these are our webless and waterfowl gun seasons. And over the next 6 slides, you will see on the left, the federal frameworks. And then on the right, within those frameworks, our staff recommendations for seasons and daily bag limits. These are our different seasons for different species groups for our webless gun seasons, mourning doves, our rail species, gallinules and moorhens, woodcock and common snipe. Then our early or our September waterfowl seasons, including Canada geese and September teal. Our various general duck seasons, including mergansers, coots, and sea ducks. Our zoned Canada goose seasons, including our resident Canada goose population zone, and then our season recommendations for the Northeast hunt zone. Our staff recommendations for brant, like geese and tundra swans. And finally, our recommendations for our youth and veterans and military waterfowl days. None of these seasons have changed significantly from 2022-23. We do have a few changes I'll go over here in a few minutes, but for the most part, these are the same. And then similarly, these are our extended falconry seasons, staff recommendations there in the bottom right. These are for mourning doves, rails, gallinules, and moorhens, woodcock, and then duck, mergansers, and quails. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go over any of these individually unless you have questions on those, and we can circle back to that in a minute. But I did want to spend just a few minutes on those seasons that have changed, whether that's an internal change to the season structure or whether that's a framework change from the Fish and Wildlife Service for you to consider. So first is our 2023-24 duck seasons. This is our third season under zoning. Remember, we got a 5-year window where we've tried to maintain a similar season structure over those 5 years. We've done that over the first 3. And the federal frameworks obviously allow us to have a 60-day season with a 6 duck daily bag. And of course, we can't have more than 3 season segments in either one of our duck hunting zones. So the biggest change for 23-24 is a calendar change. January 31st now falls on a Wednesday. And as you know, we try to carry our seasons out to January 31st. It's a similar season structure in both zones. You'll notice that we offer some days in October, most of the month of November, including the Thanksgiving holiday. And then, as I mentioned, ending the season as late as possible on January 31st and just taking those remaining days and backing those up wherever it falls on the calendar. So the big change for this year is we can't offer or recommend the third season segment to start on a Saturday, just because the way the calendar falls out. We still try to maximize the number of Saturdays, open and close our season segments on Saturday when possible, but this year was just, we weren't unable to do that. So the big change here, and it's really not a big change, but you'll notice in the third season segment in both zones, those start on a weekday versus a Saturday. For the inland zone, the first year we offered them 3 days of hunting in October. And given really didn't matter because we were starting on a weekday in the third segment anyway, we gave them another day as opposed to the 22-23 season where we only had 2 days in October. We gave them 3 days in the inland zone. The coastal zone, other than what I mentioned, is pretty much remain unchanged. So There are your 2023-24 duck season staff recommendations. Some federal changes to the frameworks. There are two of those. The first of which is an increase in the mallard daily bag limit from what we had. We had 2 mallards with 1 hen. We're now allowed to take 4 mallards with 2 hens. And this is based on some work that Atlantic Flyway Technical Section has done over the last 5 years. We brought that recommendation to council. Council approved it, and then the service approved it. So we can now take a 4 mallard daily bag limit. For the Northeast Canada Goose Hunt Zone, I mentioned to you in the last couple of meetings that some work's been done to include North Carolina and make us similar in terms of the number of days we hunt and bag limits to the rest of the flyway for Atlantic population Canada geese. Atlantic population Canada geese have rebounded. The service now allows for a liberal season in all of the Atlantic population goose zones, the Atlantic flyway, including North Carolina. And while our number of days hasn't changed, we'll still remain at 30. We're now offered a 2-bird daily bag in the Northeast hunt zone. So staff recommended we take both of those bag limit increases going forward for 2023-24. And then finally, let me go back up here. I'm not going to go to doves yet. Before I move on to doves, which is going to be the meat of the rest of the presentation, probably good to stop and just, is there any questions or comments or discussion on the gun season or extended falconry, specifically the staff recommendations? Yes, sir.
Okay, a couple of questions.
Okay.
I was asked to ask about cormorants, about hunting them. Are they considered geese in the season, or are they not to be shot?
Cormorants are a non-game species, so their take of cormorants is usually guided by either a depredation order from the Fish and Wildlife Service, but we don't hunt cormorants. We haven't in the past. So, yeah.
Okay, has the Fed ever considered taking the season into February?
No.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Just quickly on the seasons opening on a Monday and closing on a Wednesday particularly, and you had mentioned about being conscious of trying to make them as many Saturdays in there as you can. And I understand the psychological thing of January 31st is a tradition to end duck hunting season, being a duck hunter. And so, but I was wondering, is it possible, would it be considered in the future, maybe if something like that comes up, to back it up to where we'd actually start on the Saturday and end on a Monday? I think we ended on a Monday this year too, and capture one more Saturday for primary the working hunters that we.
Yes, our objectives early on were to do so, to maximize the number of Saturdays. That's what our hunters have told us, but our hunters have also told us very strongly they want to go out to the end of the season.
Yeah.
So that's why we've always really, it would be easy to do that this year.
But everybody likes
To start
31st.
on
I get that.
Saturday, but then, we get a big snowstorm, Monday following that Saturday, and nobody can hunt. So anyway, so primarily that was based on what hunters have told us, and we're going to, at least staff are going to continue to recommend we go out to the 31st.
Any thought of making the 31st a state holiday?
And the 29th and the 30th,
Yeah.
that's the Monday and the
I think that's
Tuesday.
beyond my pay.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Federal holidays.
That's it, federal.
Okay. In staying with seasons and season dates and staff recommendations, and moving into doves, when we put out our staff proposed seasons for public comment this year, you can see those in the upper center there. Those are a little different than what you're going to see as a staff recommendation, your exhibit P3. And I'm going to ask that we kind of let that simmer a little bit until we go through the dove survey, but we did make a change to the staff recommendation. Basically, you can see all we did was take 6 days from the November season and add that to the first segment at the end of the first segment, and take that segment out to October the 7th. So hopefully it'll be clear why we recommended that as I go through the actual survey, but I'll ask that we just let that simmer and come back to that here in just a few minutes and have a discussion on it. All right. As most of you are aware, we just completed our first statewide dove hunter survey since 2012. This was a collaborative effort between the social science team and the wildlife management division. So I'm going to go through the results of that survey. So in terms of our survey objectives, they haven't changed since 2012. We really wanted to determine, demographics and general participation patterns of our dove hunters. We wanted to understand where and when they're hunting. We want their opinions on the current dove season structure and shooting hours. We always want to know how satisfied they are and any potential barriers they have to participation in dove hunting. We like to ask some questions about how dove hunters use game lands. And then finally, it's important, to compare those results of the 22 survey back to what we did in 2012. In terms of methodology, we used HIP to identify anyone who had an active HIP certification from September 1st, 2021 through March 2022, which would be inclusive of the 21-22 dove season. So having done that, we pulled about 230,000 HIP certified hunters. 70 of those indicated to us that they were actually dove hunters. We used the HIP screening questions to do that. If they indicated that they hunted and killed or didn't kill a bird, they hunted but didn't kill a bird, or up to 30 birds or more than 30 birds, they were included in our sampling pool. So of those 70,000 or so potential dove hunters, this is an email survey, so we only were able to include those individuals that indicated or that we had a valid unique email address for. So that took that sampling pool down to around 45,000 potential survey respondents. And we took a random sample of those 45,000 and sent them a survey. We sent the survey out in mid-September of 2022 and left the survey open for a month. We had 1,847 dove hunters respond to the survey for a response rate of 9.9%. And I'm told that's fairly similar to other email surveys we've done recently. So 9.9% response rate. Okay, demographics. You can see in the upper right here, that's just a breakdown of the demographic characteristics of our survey respondents. And then in the lower right, that's just the percentage of respondents in different age categories. And as you can see, the majority of our respondents were white males, and the majority of respondents were at least 35 years of age or older. In terms of general participation, in the upper right, we asked respondents what other species of migratory birds they hunted. And then in the lower right, we asked them to rank the importance of dove hunting relative to their other dove hunting activities. So we didn't ask the first question in 2012, but the majority of respondents also told us that they hunted ducks, geese, or swans as opposed to other migratory game birds. The majority of respondents stated dove hunting was really not more important than any of their other hunting activities, which was a little bit of a change from 2012. There were less respondents that said that dove hunting was more important than they did in 2012. In the upper right there, those are the number of respondents or the number of days respondents spent dove hunting. And then in the lower right, we asked respondents how many doves they typically harvested in a typical season. So the majority hunt doves 2 to 5 days in a typical season and harvest between 1 and 15 doves. And these results were really almost identical to what we found in 2012. In terms of where people hunted, we asked the same question in 2012. We asked hunters to tell us what regions of the state they hunted most frequently. And we broke the state into 5 regions, as you can see here, going west to east, the mountains, the northern and southern Piedmont, and the northern and southern coastal plain. And these results were identical. The 2022 results are in red, 2012 in black. And you can see that most respondents indicated they most frequently hunted in the southern coastal plain, followed by the northern Piedmont. Then we moved on and asked them what types of lands they hunted. On the left, we asked respondents to identify the type of lands they hunted in terms of ownership. Whether it was private property they owned, they leased, or just had permission to hunt on versus game lands. And the majority of respondents by far told us that they dove hunted on private lands, similar to 2012. And then on the right, we asked respondents what type of land management occurred on the areas they most frequently hunted, whether it was areas that were typically or normally grown and harvested ag fields like corn or soybeans versus areas that are specifically planted to attract doves like a soybean field, or whether they split their time between those two types of land management. And majority of respondents typically hunt on normally grown and harvested agricultural fields, cut corn, probably by far the most common. And again, similar to 2012. And then we certainly wanted to understand, how hunters respond to the current dove season structure and how they hunt within those 3 season segments. So we presented the respondents with the current dove season structure, which would have been at that time the 2021-22 season structure, where we had early season hunting in September, and then most of the month of November, and then the rest of the days were late and went out to the last available day we could hunt, which was January 31st. And the objectives for those season dates in terms of staff, obviously we wanted to provide as much opportunity as possible early. We want people to be able to hunt during the holidays. We like to open and close our segments on a Saturday, obviously, and then, as I mentioned, extend the season as late as possible. What I'm not going to do here in my discussion of the season structure is make comparisons to 2012 because it's kind of apples and oranges. At that time, the federal frameworks only gave us a 70-day season, and then we had to close the season by January 15th. So I'm going to stick to discussions just on the 2021-22 season structure. So first, we asked respondents, how satisfied were they with that 2021-22 season structure? And by far, the majority were somewhat or very satisfied, which is good to hear. We then asked how often respondents hunted within each of those dove season segments. So you can see during the first segment, 94% of our respondents had hunted during the first season segment, while only 37% hunted in the second and third season segments. And regardless of what segment they hunted in, the majority of our hunters hunted between 2 and 6 days in any segment they hunted. So it's similar to the number of days hunted that I showed you previously. We then asked respondents to tell us when they hunted within each of those dove season segments. So for the first season segment, the majority hunted the first week, while in the second and third season segments, most people just hunted sporadically throughout the season segment. Okay, we then asked about the importance of being able to hunt during different months during the season from September through January. And what we found was that the majority of respondents certainly indicated that September and October were the most important months to be able to hunt. And as you moved out of October, we got the response that hunting during that time was not as important, and that's on a scale from not at all important to extremely important. And then shooting hours, and I captioned that with 2012 here. In 2012, we were, even though the federal frameworks allowed us, or I say us, WRC, to open the season a half hour before sunrise throughout the season, we were still limiting opening day shooting hours till noon. So we asked this question, what people thought about that in 2012. And at that time, 31% of the respondents indicated they supported continuing to limit shooting hours on opening day till noon, while 58% indicated they wanted to shoot half hour before sunrise throughout the season. So compared to the recent survey, you can see that those that continue to support or would support closing the season on opening or limiting the season opener on the first day till noon. That dropped from 31 to 12%, while the support for allowing shooting hours to continue to occur 1/2 hour before sunrise throughout the entire season increased from 53 to 84%. So, you know, the dove hunters are telling us they want to continue to be able to hunt 1/2 hour before sunrise throughout the season. All right, moving on to dove hunter satisfaction. You know, we asked just a general question, you know, how satisfied are you with the way WRC manages doves? And in 2012, 45% of people were either somewhat or very satisfied in how we manage doves. And good to hear that in this survey, that increased to 58%. Almost 60% of our survey respondents indicated that they were somewhat or very satisfied with how WRC manages our dove populations. Okay, we then ask how the dove hunting experience has changed over the years since respondents had began dove hunting. And you can see here that more respondents indicated it's gotten either a little or much worse versus those that said it has gotten a little or much better. So when we ask respondents or those that said dove hunting has gotten a little or much worse, why that was, although we didn't get a huge number of respondents answering that question, those that did indicated there are less doves available to hunt than there used to be. So just for interest, I put up the dove population estimates for the last 20 or so years there on the left. That's the Eastern Management Unit, doves in millions on the y-axis, and then of course the trend over the years on the x-axis. So in 2012 there were 85 million doves. In 2022, 39 million doves. So I consider myself an avid dove hunter, and you know, these people are telling us maybe there's less doves available to us. I kind of think the same thing. Just with my dove hunting hat on, I tend to believe that, you know, what we're seeing in terms of our breeding population estimates are actually playing out on the landscape. So, yep.
Who provided you with those?
In 2003, the flyways, I should say, decided to move to banding to generate our population estimates from one year to the next. So we did so as an agency in 2003. We started a statewide dove banding program, primarily our own staff, but we do have volunteers. So we band doves, and based upon how many of those doves are shot in subsequent hunting seasons, we generate these population estimates. So it's all based on banding.
My experience is I would agree completely. Is there any reason for that decline? What is that decline attributable to?
We're struggling with that. We've looked, we're trying to understand if there may be some biases in our banding data. Some of the inputs to our banding data we use to generate the estimate. And then we've also considered whether, say, banding on areas where doves are hunted may have biased our harvest rates, which have a big impact on the population estimate. So we're looking at some things, but at the same time, we're introducing and working on a new population model that integrates a lot more information into it to hopefully better understand your question. So stay tuned.
What percentage of the population is hunter take?
Excuse me?
What percentage of the population is hunter?
The harvest
take?
rate?
Yeah, the harvest.
Current
rate.
harvest rate's about 15%, depending on what state you're in.
I mean, if this information is valid, and it was a duck population, we'd be cutting the limits or cutting the season. So
Right now, we are right on the threshold of going back from from a 90-day season to a 70-day season, and from 15 birds to 10 birds per day. So we're right there. I mean, it wouldn't take but a few million doves to make that count go down and change our regulatory packages. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, you said this, but I'm going to lead up to another question.
Okay.
What flyway is that? count based on?
That's the Eastern Management Unit. It's really not a flyway, but basically it's every state east of the Mississippi River. is in
Okay,
the
every
Eastern
state east of the
Management.
Mississippi. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
That's
so
helpful.
Atlantic and Mississippi flyways.
And you may be getting to this, but if Hunter Harvest is roughly 15% of the mortality, what do you see as the reasons for the decline in the population?
We're still struggling with that, as I mentioned. My personal opinion, I don't think where we ban doves has anything to do with it. I think there may be some bias in some of our inputs into that population model, for example, age or sex ratios. But hopefully with this new population model, with a lot more input into it, then we can more fully understand if that's where that change is coming from in terms of the population declining. Yes, sir.
If you said we're that close, why don't we go ahead and kick the can down the road?
That's a great question. And I'm our representative, the agency's representative on the Eastern Management Unit Technical Committee. And we've done that with other species. We did that with Atlantic population Canada geese about 3 years ago. We also did it to Brant about 5 years ago. And I suggested maybe that's something we want to go ahead and do instead of keep hovering around this line, get below that line for a while, cut some harvest, and, let that run for a while. But the rest of the members felt like that we had a procedural, we really needed to stick with the plan. The harvest plan for doves calls for that threshold level change. And until we get there, they felt like we probably shouldn't do that. But that's a great question and something I actually supported in the Duck Committee.
That prevent us from doing it anyway? Doug,
Excuse me?
does that prevent us, as the Wildlife Commission, you pointed?
No, South Carolina does that. South Carolina does that. South Carolina has never taken the full federal framework for doves.
But we do have the discretionary, it's in our discretion to change that?
Yes,
So.
we can be more restrictive of the federal frameworks. We just can't be more liberal.
So two or three questions. So changing the framework, in my opinion, I mean, if most people hunt 1 to 2 days, so. Yeah, we don't have a lot of leeway. I mean, I don't think going from 90 to 70 is gonna change that scenario much at all, based on the stuff you just showed us. Truly, I mean, how concerned are you? I mean, that's a big number. The rest of us sitting here, that's a shocking number.
No kidding.
But at the end of the day, if we don't know, I mean, how do we determine what the problem is? Do you need more resources? What do you need to help figure out why we've gone from 85 to 39?
You ought to take maybe it was your third question. But, in terms of dove harvest, it's so front loaded. Going from 90 to 7 days, 90 days to 70 days, it's going to do nothing in terms of harvest rate. Nothing. Now, the bag limit decrease may be more impactful, but if we decided to be more restrictive, then I don't think it's going to move the needle at all because we're so front loaded in our seasons and that's where our harvest occurs. So my hope is that this integrated population model we embarked upon, and we're in the final stages of starting to plug in some scenarios into that model to see what's changed and run it back, 10 or 15 years. My hope is that we can find maybe some bias in there that we've not accounted for. There's more information going into the model. Maybe all this will make more sense a year from now. So I'm not telling you, hold on, and I can't answer your question, but I'm hopeful that this new process, this new model is going to tell us a lot more than what we're about harvest and its impact on dove population than what we can say now. So, is that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of moving the bag limit more than cutting the days, because I don't see cutting the days is gonna change the
It's
thing.
not, you're exactly right. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, that's a pretty dramatic drop, obviously, and I'm just wondering if we've ever looked at population and development as it relates to these numbers. What's happened when you're doing the whole east of the Mississippi, that's a pretty big area. So I don't know if that's practical, but it seems like loss of habitat is generally the largest contributor to declines like that. And I'm just wondering if anybody's ever looked at development and population growth for the dove habitats as it relates to dove habitats over the past 10 years and see if that has had some sort of a correlation.
The way the individual states that are banning it and hunt doves have tried to address this is distribute their banning effort between urban sites and then between rural and
Right.
rural sites. So to try to, where we're banning, try to pick up any differences in that, which would be probably productivity across those different types of habitats. So kind of hard to get at that. I mean, it's, doves are pretty prolific, that they'll breed 3 or 4 times a year. And I don't think my opinion, the productivity is probably not a lot different in somebody's backyard than it is, somewhere out in the country. So.
Agree. Well, yeah, but I mean, they need trees and water basically for
Right.
roosting and
Right.
feeding. And when you start taking those elements away from the ability for wildlife to access them, then you decrease their opportunities to breed because dove are prolific breeders. But so I'm just concerned that, not concerned, I mean, I don't know what the word is there, but I'm just wondering if there's a correlation there. And if there is, then perhaps we can start looking at how to manage the areas that they do have access to.
Well, given we try to band, which is our primary input to get hunter harvest recoveries, that's go into these harvest models. We're not seeing a big drop off in productivity, at least the way we measure it now.
Right.
But the way we measure productivity going forward is much more involved. So I'm hoping, again, that new integrated population model will hopefully account for some of those concerns and give us a little bit better indices of productivity specifically. Yes, sir.
Did you discuss the resident migratory issue? Is it an issue? I see birds all year round. And then I see more during the dove season. But what's the reality of migratory against residents?
Well, doves are considered a migratory game bird, although we have resident species. We still have doves coming from other states in the winter. And
So have we looked to see if these are migratory decline or is it?
if the major part of the decline is in birds that would stay in the state the whole year versus those that move from one state to another, no, we haven't looked at that at all.
In y'all study, are y'all also looking at agricultural practices just to see if they're planting, for some reason, there's either more peanuts or cotton or something versus corn?
We're looking at the banding data and trying to assign those types of differences to the banding data. With that bird banded, where there's a lot more agricultural crops, is it banded where we've got more development? So we're looking into that too, to see what impact that may or may not have on harvest.
And was I hearing that sometime either next year or the following year, sometime in the next 12 to 24 months, we should have more data from this study so that we could at that point make
Within that
maybe a
time
more
frame,
informed decision on
Yeah.
if we want to
within that
change it?
time frame, the Dove Technical Committees hope to have that integrated population model completed and to the flyways for consideration. Once those are passed through the councils, then they will go up to the service for final approval, and then we'll start being able to set our seasons based on that new model, whatever it's telling. They tell us to cut the season right off the bat, so.
During this 10-year window where we had more than 50% decline, how many states went from a 12 o'clock opening to half an hour before sunrise? Were we the only one, or were there multiple states that made that change?
The states that most of the southern states had that restriction at some point or another, but once you get out of North Carolina or Virginia, that's not common at all anywhere else.
What's
So
not common? Half hour sunrise or 12 minutes?
it's not common for states to limit shooting hours above what the federal frameworks allow. Or
I
below
think-
what the federal frameworks allow. So outside of the southeast, there aren't states that are saying you can't start hunting until noon on opening day, for example.
Commissioner Alexander.
Oh, thank you. This my suggestion be if you have to cut the limit, we used to be used to 12 birds and we went up to 15, that's great. If you cut it back to 10, I think you're gonna have an uproar. And if you went to 12 and said, this is what we're doing now until we get a better idea, I think hunters would be more receptive to that. It's just, I think it's a mental thing between 15 to 10 versus 15 to where we used to be. Just put that in my mind and I can live with the 12. It's okay. We understand. You go to 10 and for whatever reason, it gets in my craw. And I can't tell you why, but I just think other hunters might feel the same way.
And I'll just say, I personally think that we should just leave it alone until, if we've got a study that's being done and we're gonna know more in the next 12 to 24 months, I think we should wait until we get more information.
Mr. Chairman, the way to hell is paved with good intentions. My whole thing on this is suppose it comes back when we get all this information and it's dropped another 3.5, 4 million. When we could have made a change internally ourselves.
If it has, it's gonna probably drop 4 million the next year and 4 million the next year, cause they ain't gonna. Boy, and again, this isn't based on science, but there's more corn piles on the landscape than there's ever been in the history of the state of North Carolina, because we allow bait for deer. There's 10 to 12, 15 doves on every corn pile in the state of North Carolina, and everybody's 2 acre, 4 acre, whatever. There gotta be more to it than, I don't know, I mean, that's a huge drop number. There ain't that much change. I mean, again, they're not ground breed nesting birds, I mean, that's astonishing to me in 10 years that 46 million birds or less on the
It's
landscape.
closer to 20 years, actually.
And
And if they really are less,
Right, I mean,
we
that's
don't
what I'm saying,
know.
We don't know. Was 85 a bad number and 39 is a bad number? Somewhere in the middle is where we really were, and I don't know, but I don't, I mean,
I'm not with this. What time of year are you been? Is it breeding season?
July through August 31st.
I just wonder if any of the breeding were data.
Well, that's typically a estimate that's, you know,
I mean,
what I've seen, it's not very valuable
I
for
mean, it ain't
ducks.
gonna make it.
It's better for, it's pretty good for
Difference.
wood ducks, for example, but
Dates ain't
does
gonna
not
make
so
any
much.
difference.
I'm starting to think.
I mean, the counts are just flat, and there's not a lot of variation in the breeding bird survey for dove. It's just flat. It doesn't tell you anything.
So quick question, what about the songbird decline that we're all reading about, the 500 billion less songbirds that are out there? You gotta believe that this is has some effect on doves also. I mean, is there any? If there's any.
You know, my personal opinion or my professional opinion in all this is that doves have reached a new threshold. You know, they were up here. They've reached a new threshold, but they're staying at that threshold. It's not like, you know, they're just went down to, you know, 15 million doves. But
If this decline was over, you know, a shorter period of time, it'd be that much more alarming. But the question is John was alluding to, is just, do we have enough facts really to make a change? And I could go with it either way, but if there's studies going on, it might shine something on it. I don't know that hunter harvest is the big deterrent here.
and that's the driver of, you know, how these estimates were generated as well, is harvest. That's what we can control, so to speak.
Can we take this opportunity to try to educate folks? The dove is the worst nest builder we have. He doesn't know how to interlock his branches, and so they're very susceptible to spring storms and disbursement. You can aid that population by helping them build nests with certain welded rat wire and trees and stuff. Do we look at with our magazine telling our people, hey, if you want to increase your dove populations, here's some methods you can do yourself to help your dove population?
That's above my.
That would be a neat article. though.
That one went right over my head.
I mean,
That'd be
it's
good.
right there, she's fine. I mean, that's.
Just, there's more than just aiding them with their nest. How can you help improve your dove population on your farm?
Well, I'm hoping I can come back to you a year from now and say, here's a new integrated population model.
Well, and let's just.
We ran that back through 20 years.
So we need to
Yeah,
move
but
this
changed.
along. If there's not
Yeah.
any other questions, I think we just need to circle back next year and. Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As pertaining to Commissioner Craig's comments, we do have an upcoming Dove article that we're going to incorporate some good information into it that's coming out that you'll see the next issue or issue after next. Anyway, it's coming. And so we'll take to your comments and maybe we can incorporate some of that.
Tommy Vaughn had a question. Do we have any harvest data prior to being able to hunt in the morning and after allowing to hunt in the morning?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right,
Okay.
do we need to, on all your staff recommendations, is that something that we'll vote on then tomorrow? Anybody have any more questions for Doug? All right, moving on. Doug, is that your end of your?
Okay, moving on to, yeah.
Is Christina
go
going to
fast
be
here.
coming or is he going to do? his?
Okay, we asked hunters about any barriers for their participation in dove hunting, and similar to 2012, the top 3 or 4 reasons given as barriers were that dove hunting areas on public lands were too crowded, the public lands didn't attract doves, there just weren't enough public lands to hunt, and access to private lands to hunt. So interestingly, those that said or at least responded about what's not a barrier. We continue to hear that regulation complexity is just not a barrier to participation, whether it's dove hunting or any of our other migratory game bird seasons. In terms of participation on dove hunting on game lands, majority of respondents have not or rarely have hunted WRC game lands. Those that did indicated that Butner Falls of Neuse, Sandhills, and Jordan were the 3 most frequently hunted game lands, which is unchanged from 2012. Again, we asked respondents if they didn't hunt on game lands, how come? And the majority said they just have other places to go hunting, primarily on private lands. Then we asked the likelihood of people hunting on dove hunting areas on game lands if they were closer to their home, and the majority said yes. And then in terms of participation in dove permit hunts, most people or most respondents indicated they haven't applied for any dove permit hunts within the last 5 hunting seasons. So circling back to the staff recommendations for our dove season. I mentioned that the major change here was adding more early days. We added 6 days, and we took those from the November season segment. As you remember from the survey, hunters told us that they hunted other migratory game birds, but most of those migratory game birds they hunted were either ducks, geese, or swans. So taking those 6 days from November makes sense if you approve doing this, because our waterfowl seasons are in at that time. So they also told us when we started asking those specific questions about our season structure that they most often hunted early, and they put more importance in days in September and October versus days later in this season, November through January. So hopefully this recommendation encompasses that. Basically, we're just adding some more days in October before our major waterfowl seasons kick in and there's more opportunity to hunt. And I call it a tweak, not necessarily a change, but hopefully having heard the results of the survey, that makes sense why we recommended that. So any questions on the change? Okay.
All right, thank you, Doug. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Christina Watkins on the economic impacts of dove hunting.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Great. Hello, I'll be brief in the interest of time, but this was part of the survey that we sent out to our dove hunters last September and October. As part of the survey, we asked dove hunters how much they spend on an average dove hunting trip. And we asked things about how much they're spending on things like food and drink, on ammunition, gasoline to get to the fields, various different items like that. Then we asked the number of trips that dove hunters take per season. And then we combine that with the total number of dove hunters that we receive from HIP. And to get our total trip expenditures per dove hunting trip. We then put that economic data from the survey that we collected into an input-output model through this proprietary software called InPlan, which spits out these various effects of this economic activity, which is the dove hunting expenditures. In the interest of time, the model shows all these different economic indicators that show not just the direct impacts of individual purchases, but how those impacts trickle through the economy through jobs that people have at convenience stores and sporting goods stores and ammunition factories, things like that. So it takes all that and it allows you to get at the economic impact of this activity. So through our survey, we found that the average amount spent per dove hunting trip was around $350, which is not to say that every single time somebody goes dove hunting, they spend that much. It's just aggregated across all 66,524 dove hunters. That is the total spent per day on average. We also found that dove hunters spent around 375,000 days out in the field in this last season, and the average number of trips per person is around 5 to 6. So putting that all together in our economic model, we found that the total economic impact of dove hunting trips was $112.9 million. And that economic activity supports around 1,000 full and part-time and seasonal positions throughout the state of North Carolina. This model also allows us to get the social accounting matrix multiplier, which basically shows that for every dollar that's spent on dove hunting in North Carolina, there is a $1.94 return to the state economy. So this is just another way to show kind of the economic impact of dove hunting. I know that was quick in the interest of time, so if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Yes.
I noticed on the first, one of the first slides, you did expenses, you didn't mention lodging down there. And on the slide previous to
Yes.
this, you said it was hotel and motel $4.39.
Yes.
Explain those two.
Yes, the first slide, I was just trying to illustrate the process. In the interest of space, I couldn't fill this whole list out, but these are the questions that were asked on the survey. These are the items that people were asked to estimate their expenditures. So while you may spend maybe $100 at a hotel, thousands of other people aren't spending any money on hotels because they're not staying at hotels to go dove hunting. So when you average that out, it ends up being $4.
And I'd just probably like to add also, there's impacts, if you think of the folks who are planting sunflower fields and stuff, there's
Yes.
money that is spent to attract ducks or doves, have dove hunts and so forth.
Yeah, this is just
As well.
the economic impact of hunting trips, really. We could ask much more detailed questions.
I'm not saying to go ask that, but I'm saying there's also
Yeah,
a lot of
that's
money
the
being,
scope of
there's
the
a whole lot
survey,
more
yes.
money being spent other than just.
It's a very
this.
conservative estimate.
Any other questions for Christina? Thank you very much. All right, Brad, any
I believe
additional
that
topics?
wraps up our agenda. We didn't do too bad. Any other questions or comments for other topics, Mr. Chairman?
All right, with that, we're adjourned.
Allard limit went up. Allard limit was up.
As a reminder, this meeting is being streamed live and recorded, at the public record. The recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. Margaret, would you call the roll, please?
Do a roll call for our Education and Communication Committee members. Committee Chair Kelly Davis,
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Jim Ruffin,
Here.
Committee Member Ray Clifton, Committee Member John Stone, Committee Member Tom Hayslip,
Here.
Committee Member J.C. Cole.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Over to the.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Davis and Commissioners. About in 2021, I stood before you and I talked about some short-term, and long-term goals that we're working towards for the Wildlife Education Division. And today you're going to see that work in progress. With the Pathways Project and kind of the realignment of the Wildlife Education Division, along with the events that we had happen at Pisgah when we shut down the Pisgah Center, we kind of realigned that team to create a fishing and aquatic education team. That team's being led by Tom Carpenter. He's the manager of that team. He'll be up here talking about the work that the team is doing towards R3 efforts and education efforts towards angling and fishing. And then also after Tom, we'll have Madeline David. She's part of our operations and program development team, and she's going to be talking about some R3 efforts that we're doing to kind of raise fishing awareness out in the communities through some different efforts that we have. So in the matter of time, I know the last committee meeting kind of ran over. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. This is Tom Carpenter, our fishing education and aquatic education manager.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to give you a little overview about what we're doing with the fishing education team. We formed late in fiscal year 22 last year, combining Pisgah and Marion educators from the former Pisgah Wildlife Education Center with the Peckman staff to form the fishing education team. So while I was able to collect some data on the programs that we were doing currently in Western North Carolina and combine it with Peckman, 23 is really going to be our baseline year to establish what our pathway for growth and improvement is going to be. But if I get your attention down the lower right-hand corner, you can see the number of, these are fishing related classes solely. There's a fishing skills related to those that we've conducted in 22. We are seeing an 11% increase in participation this year so far, and we still have 130 programs on the schedule between now and the end of June. So we've got a lot more to put up there. Our goal is simply, we want to move people along the outdoor recreation adoption model continuum from the very phase and to where the point to where they self-identify as anglers, which support our conservation efforts throughout the agency. This is Dustin Bigford. Dustin and his twin brother Dawson came to us about 10 years ago through one of our fly fishing merit badge camps. They've since participated in several different classes, rod building, lure making, a lot of the fly tying classes that we do, some of the bass fishing. And they both went on to become Eagle Scouts. Both went on to study fisheries at NC State, and both are now working as rangers with NC Parks. But most importantly, it's come full circle where they both now volunteer with us at the Peckman Fishing Education Center. So what the key point that has happened here and what's most important to, and a very important element of that outdoor adoption model is there's social support at work here. Social support from the scouts, social supports from their parents, social support from my staff, our staff, and most importantly, social support that comes from the volunteers that we have working with the fishing education team. We have 36 volunteers at Peckman Center, 6 in Western North Carolina. Last year, they donated 1,517 hours, which gave us access to an additional $42,000 in federal aid. Volunteers begin their career with us with a 3-hour orientation, which we go into explaining the outdoor recreation adoption model, wildlife and sport fish restoration funding, and procedures, and a lot of the classes that we go through for volunteering at the center. And we feel that that's important, that people understand the purpose and the reason why we're doing what we do. As they go along, the thing that we do at the end of the year is we try to recognize them for the contributions, because there's no way that we could possibly do all the programming that we do without these volunteers. We have a banquet or a luncheon, if you will, that involves some training at the end of the year. They're recognized. We have a kayak and a fly fishing volunteer of the year, and then we have an overall volunteer of the year. Barry on the left there was recognized as our fly fishing volunteer of the year this past year, simply because, well, for one of the many reasons. Barry has been very dedicated to learning and improving his fly fishing technique and instruction ability. Bobby Parker on the right was recognized as our volunteer of the year overall. He mentors a lot of other volunteers. He's very knowledgeable of all of our programs and fishing in general. And one of the important things about Bobby, he's been volunteering with us for 12 years and has donated over 1,100 hours to us at this point. So social support being key. Another key point about what we do to recognize these gentlemen or our volunteers is that we participate in the Presidential Volunteer Service Awards. So if they donate at least 100 hours per year, they'll get for 100 hours, they get a bronze pin and a certificate signed by the president. So social support being key. What we know about the outdoor recreation adoption model is, in the past, agencies and organizations have all been focused on the recruitment phase of the adoption model. Leading up to the decision to continue, there's never been any resources past that up until we came along and started developing some of our programs. So key things that we know from studies and surveys, that from our surveys internally and the surveys from organizations like Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation, American Sport Fish Association, is the main thing or a key factor that keeps people from trying fishing is a lack of knowledge. So we look at what we can do to provide that. The other thing is not having somebody to go with, never being invited to go fishing. And anglers most often lapse because they've lost their fishing partner. So the social support always comes back full circle to that part of that element. So before we develop a program, and our educators are tasked with developing 2 new programs each year. But before we do that, we sit down and map these programs out on the outdoor adoption model. And what 3 things we ask is, who is the target audience? And we base that off the 7 fishing personas that is established with material from American Sport Fish Association. And where is the social support? How are we going to continue to support this activity? What other organizations will support this activity for us? And most importantly, what's the next step? Once we've had a participant in the class, where do we go with it from there? So currently we have 54 different workshops. 10 of those are basic workshops, 39 are advanced. And because we find that people are wanting a little bit more confidence building, people going out there and mentoring them on the water and doing more things to build their confidence to be able to fish on their own, we offer 4 fishing experiences. One is a fly fishing experience. Each one of these experiences, there's a prerequisite classes that they must attend before we go on these classes. There's a kayak fishing experience, and then a surf and pier where we partner with Fayetteville Parks and Rec Wounded Warrior Project and Marine Fisheries for some of the activities that we do. This is an example of one of the slides from our programs. We're highly involved with instructional technology. Our team there at the Peckman Center is real adept at creating graphics and making interesting looking presentations and handouts that improve the educational experience as we're going through this. We do a lot of these graphics and stuff in-house, work really hard at it. And all that is designed to kind of keep things interesting, but yet the programs are practical. So there's useful information delivered to the public that they can use when they go out and participate in fishing. So after we've created a program and conducted a program, we send out a survey to each one of the participants and we collect the feedback. And Conservation Policy and Analysis does an excellent job of putting together that information and formatting it so it's easy for us to read and be able to make decisions about where we're going to go with these programs in the future. These are some of the contents or comments that we get. Obviously, what we hear is they love it and they want to see more of it. So this is what we base our information off of going forward. These are some of the most often asked for programs that we have. Fish preparation and cookery, which is one that we currently do. We know from Recreational Boating Fishing Foundation that 50% of anglers out there are consumptive users. So if we want to encourage them to participate more, we find ways to help them figure out what to do with their catch. Species specific information. That's what we're focusing on at this point is the 3 most sought after species and trying to develop programs around them. That's bass, catfish, and crappie. I did say crappie. I know somebody was going to call me out on that. And then also the saltwater fishing techniques. So that's pier and surf fishing techniques as well. Our pathway forward, we've been working with Western educators trying to get them to incorporate the Peckman Center programs that we've already established with the lesson plans and stuff that we have for those programs. And Peckman Center staff has traveled over there to help conduct a number of these programs. And what we have gotten in feedback from the public that part of the state really has a pretty big appetite for this program. We put a priority on family fishing workshops. Again, social support, that's the key. And then a basic adult fishing workshops. So we know we've missed probably at least 2, if not 3 generations of adults that are more urbanized now than we've ever been. So these people have never had a social support mechanism in place that would encourage them to participate in fishing. So we're opening up those knowledge pathways for them to come in, get to know people that are experienced fishermen, work with staff, and then continue that social support mechanism with that. And then, particularly in the western part of the state, my goal is to develop a strong volunteer corps there that's trained and it can assist with these programs. We're going to look for about 50 volunteers at the Peckman Center and 25 for the Western North Carolina centers. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Madeline, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Okay, good morning. I'm Madeline David, if we haven't met before, the Angler Engagement Coordinator with the Commission. And I have a lot of projects and programs that fall under my purview, but today I'm really going to talk about 2. The first one being the Tackle Loaner Program. Do me a favor, if you don't mind digging into your lovely Oprah swag bag. I reference it because not only is this an item I'm going to talk about, but inside it, I have some rack cards that I'd like you to take a look at. Those are some new materials for the Tackle Loaner Program, and I'll be referencing those. And as you're doing that, I'll go ahead and get started. So for those of you who need a refresher or a reminder or simply don't know, the Tackle Loaner program is something that we've been apparently doing since the 90s, aka the decade in which I was born. And it is a partnership that we head up with all these different cities, counties, state parks, and various other entities like museums, libraries. I've even got a YMCA. And I partner with these sites to allow people to go and borrow fishing gear completely free. They sign up just like a library. They go in, they register for the program, they get an ID card, and then they can borrow that gear, usually for a day, maybe 2 days. We give a lot of autonomy to the partner sites. And it's a fantastic, when we think about, R3 and how Tom is talking about bringing people into fishing, getting them interested in it, growing their skills. This is a great tool because it allows them to try fishing out without having to actually make the investment in the gear. So it gives that trial opportunity. The map that you're looking at right now is from our fishing access map, and those are all of the different tackle loaner sites currently across the state of North Carolina. So I took over Tackle Loaner program in early 2022. And the first thing I did right out the gate was realize that there was a huge need for bringing this thing basically into modern day technology. And by that, I mean, we were not tracking data-wise whatsoever how many people were using this program, the success of the program as we look at those numbers, how many sites we have. We weren't doing a very good job at thinking about how we can measure and evaluate this program. So I was very excited to go ahead and launch an online registration system. That being said, now when someone registers for the program, we are capturing a bunch of wonderful information about who they are, where they live, some demographic information, so we can really think about who are these people that are using the program, and then use that later down the road about how we can continue to engage with these very specific groups of people to get them to continue to fish, right? Because we have moved into this more evaluation data-centric approach, now we can really evaluate not only the participants, but the partner sites. We can look at just the overall success of this. Are we doing well in the way that we offer this program to both the partners and the public? So along with that is a bunch of completely revamped marketing and promotional tools that, again, let's bring this thing into the 21st century. It really needed that love. That's the way I look at it. The TLP needed some TLC. So what I have here is an 11x17 poster that lives at every single tackle loaner site. So when someone goes and registers for the program, there's a beautiful QR code on there. We all love QR codes. And that's how they register, okay? They get a little ID card. They can use that at any other tackle loaner site in the state. Again, just like a library system, you can take it wherever, do the same thing, whether you are in, the eastern part of the state all the way up to the mountains. Some other things that we did. So we got the ID card I mentioned, posters for registration, the rack cards, which are in your hands, social media and website video content. What you're looking at on the right side of the screen is a YouTube video that shows you what's inside of a tackle loaner tackle box. So, quick backstory. We used to be giving out these Shakespeare branded tackle boxes. Anytime someone registers for the program for the first time and they're 15 or under, this is like a little cute incentive that they get to take home, right? To hopefully encourage them to continue fishing. One of the things I did when I was restocking the inventory for this program is I said, no more Shakespeare. Let's do a completely branded tackle loaner program tackle box, right? It's ours, it's our program, we need to own it. So here's us owning it. When you open up the tackle box, there's this lovely little bookmark inside. You can see it on the right-hand side of the screen, it's the same thing. And it has, again, a QR code. So now these people can scan this code, it links them to this video, and I walk through everything that's inside the tackle box and how to, in a general sense, use it. All these different lures. So when we think about people building that confidence and building those skills to be able to fish, this is just a very small technique in trying to give them that information, those resources. Webpage overhaul, just cleaning up our webpage for the Tackle Owner program and the tackle box I just mentioned. Okay, the other thing that I'm very excited about is new adaptive gear. It kind of fell by the wayside, but it's very important when we think about accessibility and making sure that fishing is for everybody, that we offer a gear that is specifically made for anglers with varying disabilities. So let me show you what that looks like. On the right side are some pictures of the adaptive gear. The first one on the top right is a Velcro reeling adapter. So these are available to our tackle owner partners to purchase from us. The way it works, again, if you don't know, is we cover 75% of the cost of the gear. They cover 25%. So they, in their order, can purchase this equipment from us that, again, allows anglers with varying disabilities to still be able to fish. The palm grasping cuff, arm pole holder. I've also got wheelchair pole holders. Not every single tackle owner site has opted to have the adaptive gear, but about a dozen have at this point, which is great. In terms of the website and social media content, I've got a video clip right here. This is a snippet of just a 4-minute roughly video that I shot using a GoPro at Bass Lake in Holly Springs. They are my most popular tackle owner site by far. And so again, just another little 21st century modernized tool when we think about making sure people understand what is the tackle owner program, how do I get started? Is my sound should be good? Okay, so it's just a 1-minute snippet of that video. This is not the full thing. So let's head in now to the Bass Lake Park office so we can get signed up for the program. Hey, good morning. I'd like to sign up for the Tackle Owner program.
Great, good morning. So what you're gonna do is take your smartphone and scan the QR code over there on the door where it says no tackle, no problem. You'll take this card, you'll print and sign your name on the back, and you'll use that front number there for the ID code that it asks for.
So I filled out the form.
Perfect. All right, so I'm just gonna hold that card from you, and then I'll get you a poll real quick. And then once you're done, just bring it back and I'll give you the card back.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, if you want to see the full thing, I'll send you the link if you really want it. But it's on the Tackle Owner webpage, which is ncwildlife.org/TLP. And then on the left side here, one more thing I want to point out with the RAC cards is when we think about diversity and inclusion, we also have our RAC cards in Spanish. Very cool. I think you do have the Spanish version, I believe, in your bags. So this is a nice look at the eastern part of the state, and I highlight this because one of my main goals coming into this year is to expand the footprint of this program in the east. There was pretty much a black hole in the eastern part of the state, minus Cliffs of the Neuse, Greenville, and like Lake Rim. So in the last few months, I'm very excited to say that we brought on Aurora, that's a library. We've got New Bern, which is actually the county out there, not the city. And then we've got 2 different ones for Lumber River State Park, different access points. And then brand new as of February, over in Windsor and Elizabethtown. So those are all new sites as of the last maybe like 4 or 5 months. So expanding that footprint in the east, I think is something I still want to focus on because we have a great amount, I would say, in the Piedmont. The mountains, not too bad. I kind of want to look over there too, but the east really deserves that love as well. So to date, 61 active sites and growing. So moving on from Tackle Owner, which I will do questions jointly at the end. So if you have any for Tackle Owner, just hold them for now. This is the Mobile First Catch Center. So this is the other program that I wanted to talk about today, which is, it's a grant-funded trailer. It came from the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation. And a very quick timeline overview was we got this trailer in late 2021, wrapped in 2022, stocked in 2022. It hit the road for its first couple of events in 2022, only about 3 events, which I'll show you a look at some of those. So the purpose of this trailer is to bring fishing to you. And by you, I mean underrepresented, underserved populations of North Carolinians, to give them an opportunity to go fishing that they might not have otherwise had. So everything in this trailer that you might need to go fishing, it's inside there. So the charge, because it's grant funded, the charge of RBFF is that we must do at least 8 events a year in urban areas. But they're loose in the idea that it's okay if it's not quite urban, as long as it's that underserved population of people. So we're thinking minority groups, traditionally underrepresented anglers. That could mean, different types of minority groups, whether it's disability, whether it is certain races, ethnicities, whether it's female anglers. So we are just starting to really get this thing off the ground with our own staff. Our educators that are, part of the education division are able to take this thing and use it in this sense for events around the state. We did 2, I misspoke. We did 1 this past weekend at the Becoming an Outdoors Woman event. And then this weekend, we are doing 2 events, I believe, back to back down on the coast with a tribe, which is really awesome. So this thing is getting out and it's serving its purpose already. We're also going to make this so that partners can use it too. So trusted NGOs, nonprofits, whatever that looks like, we're going to get this to the point where there's a little bit of legal that has to happen on the back end, but where we can allow other folks that are not within our own agency to, again, use it for this very specific purpose, because it might belong to us, but the more people who can take this out, the better. Why hold it and harbor it as our own when it's branded with us on it? It should be able to go out into the community and touch as many people as possible. So here's a quick look at what it has been to so far. On the left side was National Hunting and Fishing Day from last September. In the middle there was Guiding Eyes Outdoors. That was an event we did in Burlington in July, and that was for anglers with vision impairment. And that was a really beautiful event to be a part of. And if you'd like to know more about that, I just wrote an article in the latest issue of the magazine. It's called Listen for the Bell. It's on page 22. And then on the right side, we have Enséñame a Pescar, which was an event we did in the Siler City area that targeted, no surprise, Hispanic anglers. All of these were wonderful. They were great successes. The trailer did fantastic out there. It served its purpose to a T. And we learned quite a bit about it too, just refining some elements of the trailer. So we're excited to see where it continues to go in the coming years. And I believe that's it from me. So Tom and I can jointly take questions now if you have any. Yes.
That was very impressive, Madeline.
Thank you.
One quick question. Who owns and operates that facility at Bass Lake?
Oh, Holly Springs.
Who does?
Holly Springs, the town of Holly Springs.
That was an impressive facility.
They are my most popular tackle hunter site by a mile. They have hundreds of signups over the last year, and it's a really, really beautiful facility. It made for a great video.
They're strong, and they're a very strong partner of ours. They work with us with a lot of programs, from hunter ed to fishing education, a lot of programs. Holly Springs, Bass Lake has been working with us for probably ever since they opened, for probably about 15 years or so.
Yes.
Do you have these tackles that are area specific, such as the mountains, Piedmont, and the coast?
We used to offer fly gear, but we found, right. So we found that there was really not a good, need and want for it. And there was also just, the general complications of providing fly gear and the intricacies of learning to fly fish. So one of the decisions that I made coming in when I was restocking inventory with, the guidance of my superiors was, let's go ahead and eliminate the fly gear. The need was not that great for it.
Are you doing anything for surf fishing, the beer fishing? I mean, is there that thing they're going or just mostly pond and river fishing, that kind of lake fishing?
This is mostly pond and river fishing. And so even when you think about like the tackle box, we geared it towards bass, more or less, because that's what we're going to be expecting most people, maybe catfish. Depends. A lot of the tackle owner sites may also be the community fishing sites where we do the catfish stocking, not all of them, but many of them. So we really kind of think about bass and catfish. And then you'll notice I don't have a single tackle owner site that is like coastal only. The only ones I have on the coast that kind of get out into that territory is really more brackish. And so we do that on purpose because we still want people to be able to think of more so freshwater. Yeah.
You mentioned the tackle box is free to anglers 15 and under.
Yes.
The other loaner program, do they get tackle aside from the rod? Or borrow that?
What did you mean other?
Like loan a tackle box with the rod they get?
Oh, so you're welcome to pass this around. I printed out a couple of these. These are the equipment inventory catalogs that I offer our partners. And so one of the things I did in 2022 was we weren't offering any sort of lures. And I thought that was a little weird. Some places like Bass Lake and Holly Springs actually has bait that you can buy right there, which is amazing. Not all of them do. So I went ahead and put together like this really nice soft plastic tackle box. So the partner agency can buy that from us and then offer those soft plastics for people who are using the program. But otherwise, they will have to bring their own bait. So, but here you go, if you're curious. And there's a couple copies of it. Mhm. Anything else for me or Tom? Yes.
On the tackle loaner program, I know you remember size victim.
Yeah.
How about? I mean, I noted,
Yeah.
obviously the number of users will increase, but do you think popularity, I know this is 1 year, any
Yeah.
trend yet, any?
I wouldn't say that I've seen like any specific trend towards a site, I guess. I can tell you that since we launched the online registration to date, I just looked the other day, I'm at over 500 registrations. So that's roughly a little over a year statewide. I think that that's a win. One of the things that I'm having to work with is that there's a lot of people out there, and again, we don't know how many, that had the old school tackle loaner ID card, which was a blue one, if you ever happen to see it. And so I am having to get my partner sites to have those people with the blue ones just re-register one time. That way I can capture that person's information. So I think I can get you some really awesome data in like maybe a year, I hope.
We have tracking that.
Yeah.
Kind of the
Yeah.
pathway project, so that was part of the first task, was to figure out a way to put that in. I would say with the amount of stuff that we've been ordering and the sites coming on, we have increased participation, but it's just been here in the last year with Madeline that we've been capturing that baseline down.
And so are you somehow tracking users on your mobile first project?
Yeah, so there will be a component there. It already exists, but when that thing hits the road, similarly, there's going to be an event sort of registration QR code. And so anyone who theoretically is touched by this trailer will register so we can capture some great information about who they are. And again, the target audience is pretty specific when we think about the underrepresented groups. So it'll be really great to capture that information and make sure it is aligning with the purpose of the trailer. So that's taking place slowly but surely. Yeah.
I guess I have a question for you. Having taken classes at Peckman and also at the former Pisgah, they're fantastic, and they really do depend on volunteers to pull this off. What in a typical class, what's your like staff to volunteer ratio when you're, I mean, it takes a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it really depends on which class. If we've registered 40 fly fishing participants, we look for one instructor for about every 3 participants. And generally we'll have 2 staff members on hand for that, but the rest of them are volunteers. And all of our programs are staff led with at least one single staff member. But all the other work that's going on is based off of what we're able to bring volunteers in to do.
And when you do your volunteer recruitment, I see it on Facebook sometimes that you advertise for volunteers. Are there other ways that you do that?
Social media, digital communications, digital marketing has been helping us out with Facebook pages, announced in the newsletters that go out. Honestly, I do a lot of spamming of Facebook groups and stuff like that as well to try to get that stuff out. So that's our primary resources for advertising.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, and even in the classes, I feel like when we get people in to volunteer, they buy into what we're doing very heavily. So they want to get their friends and family to buy into it and be a part of it as well. So that's a big part of what we do. Yeah.
You're all working, it's nice to see that increase in programs and. So, nicely done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? I think that wraps up education and communication. Did you have some closing comments?
No, I just wanted to thank the team for the work they've been doing and the presentation they put together.
Madam Chairman, right quick, I just want to say again, kudos, he just said.
Nice.
The improvements we continue to see in this division, you know, after we started over a couple of years ago, I'll tell you, they hit the trail running, the communications, all this stuff like that. I mean, it's measurable. We see it monthly with these reports, and just thank you so very much for everything y'all doing, because I see a lot of shaking heads at down the table. It is measurable. Clear. Thank you all.
If you leave one of those volunteer tackle boxes here, for us to look at. You're just on the table. No, I just I may want to learn.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
before we get started, land use, you
Yes,
want to
sir.
take a little break?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
5-minute break.
During the meeting.
Sure.
Oh,
5-minute break.
Meeting's adjourned.
There you go. Closing it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
There's a 30-second grace period here before we roll. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here, Land Acquisitions and Property Committee will commence. And first of all, we want to do is get a roll call of committee members, please, Margot.
I'll do a roll call for our Land Acquisition and Property Committee members. Committee Chair Tom Barry,
Yes.
Committee Vice Chair Brad Steinbach,
Here.
Committee Member Mark Craig,
Here.
Committee Member Jim Ruffin,
Here.
Committee Member Ray Clifton,
Here.
Committee Member Tom Haslett.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Margot. Just a note, we've mentioned it a couple of times and we will continue through the meeting. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at our website. So, duly noted, we're going to just jump right into this, but I do want to make a comment that we do have a large agenda. It has been vetted by the committee. And so we have several little things that we want to bring up and offer up for suggestions for the discussion to get your feedback on. But we've streamlined it, but there's a lot to absorb. So we're gonna go through it just to be sure that have any questions, bring them up, and we'll try to zip right through it. Anyway, with all that said, Ben Solomon is going to take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner, staff, and guests here today. We've got 9 phase 1 land acquisitions to consider. 8 phase 1s, 8 phase 2s, and 3 other property matters to take a look at today. So we'll start off with our Mount Holly Depot site. This is a property in Gaston County. It's approximately 11.51 acres. It will be a site for construction of a new Mount Holly Depot. Our current Mount Holly Depot is at the adjacent tract. It is currently a lease that does not have good long-term security. So we've been pursuing an additional site for new construction for some time now. The owner is willing to wait on an appraised price. We don't have an appraisal ordered quite yet. All in all, the current site does have a lot of limitations for our staff. It doesn't meet the needs for space, storage space, office space, or shop space. A new depot would help us design and plan for all of this. We don't have a overall land investigation score since there's no biological benefit to this acquisition. Potential funding sources include wildlife restoration funds as well as state funds. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of our Mount Holly Depot site tract.
We've gone through this overview and potential uses and discussed the lease that's close by, and it looks like a viable spot for our new depot. So maybe we'll pass that one on.
Yes, sir. So moving forward, we have another depot site. We've been looking for a new site for our Waynesville Boston Depot for some time now. The current site has a lot of safety concerns. It's adjacent to Highway 23. A lot of our lowboy trailers, heavy equipment that pulls out of that driveway has to make a sharp turn to get into traffic. Major safety concern for us. Current depot infrastructure there is deteriorated. On-site water isn't used by staff. Staff haul in water by large jugs, which sounds pretty primitive. We have well water on site. Staff just aren't comfortable drinking it due to some insecticide issues in our past well. It's approximately 16.23 acres. This current site is a very good fit. Staff have been out to the site, checked it for how the site lays. Engineers have taken a look at the site as well. One concern is a nearby bridge that will have to be reinforced to support some of the equipment we haul across. We've already coordinated with DOT. DOT is willing to strengthen that bridge if needed, if this moves forward. Funding to consider will be wildlife restoration funds as well as state funds, and staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Waynesville tract.
Okay, this one gave us some heartburn because of the price. And I think it ended up being, well, we can't pay any more than the price for it anyway, and this is what land costs in the area. And we decided that, that we would look at it and think favorably about it, but in the meantime, keep our eyes open for some other property that potentially might be up there. $800,000 for a depot site seems ridiculous, as we discussed. So I welcome discussion on this, because as soon as it leaves our plate here, then they're going to go try to find the money to buy it. So does anybody want to comment on this?
Mr. Chairman, my only comment is that I agree the price seems like a lot for what the end use is going to be. And then there's a lot of unusable land that comes with it too. And I understand when reading the explanations or the descriptions that we'll use it for some purposes, but those purposes really don't have the same impact that $800,000 could have somewhere else. So that's my comment.
Okay, yeah, any other thoughts? Fred, you giving it any more thought?
No, I brought up that price just seems way out of line to me, and a lot higher than the tax value. Suspect an appraisal is going to end up being a lot less than that asking price, and the seller is going to decline to sell at appraised value. But we can get the appraisal and wait and see.
Yeah, and we took this and looked at the old site and what can we do to expand the entrance and to get these this heavy equipment into the site, and the state's not going to allow that. So we have worn it out from every possible angle, but we welcome additional comments. So I concur with you, Brad, that it's probably well above appraised and we can't pay it, and so we'll see. So summary was keep looking, but proceed. Everybody good with that? All right, let's go to the next one.
Yes, sir. Our next tract is the Paynes Branch tract. This is a partnership acquisition with the Conservation Fund. It is a 209 acre tract. It straddles the Forsyth and Stokes County border. It would be the creation of a new game land or wildlife conservation area. The tax value for the property is $483,500. The approximate asking price is $609,000. This is total acquisition cost. The biological overview of the property will meet a priority of the agency to add new game land in underserved regions of the state. This acquisition is likely to lead to a subsequent acquisition of a 488 acre tract that's just to the north, owned by the same family. Conservation Fund has been in conversation with that adjacent property owner, and it seems to be promising. The Paynes Branch stream runs through the tract. Public access to the tract is on the southeast portion off of Edwards Road. One thing the staff indicated in the phase one write-up where development pressures are high with surrounding residential growth. Two nearby towns are Rural Hall and I believe Germantown. Potential uses, it would increase opportunity in an area with very little public access to hunting land. And so not only hunting, but other outdoor recreational activities. The overall land investigation score for this property was a 2.222. It scored well for proximity to users as well as hunting and viewing opportunities. Potential grants and funding sources include wildlife restoration funds and state funds. And while we're discussing funding, this is a phase one proposition, but I will mention that the Conservation Fund has completed some funding efforts. They had some private donations for the tract, as well as a NIFWIF coal ash grant to help bridge the funding gap.
So my understanding is that we've got 300 to 450 already committed, or is it investigation? Is this coal ash money a reality, or is it an idea? And is the Conservation Fund going to close on come up with the 300?
So to start with the Conservation Fund, their option agreement to purchase the property, I believe, expires at the end of May. And they have raised private donations to cover 50%. Coal ash monies at 180,000 would cover a little over 30%. And it would leave us with about $125,000 to
verbalize that one more time. And so we've had lots of conversation about this, and we were thinking of not pursuing it until I went back and said we need to find some more land in the immediate neighborhood. And immediately Mike Leonard, let me just tell you, these guys at the Conservation Fund get on this stuff and make it happen. We've got a commitment now. If we close on this or involved in that and get this property, then there's another 400 acres that'll be available to us. So the family wants to see this close for us. So this is a good play. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Turkey Ridge.
So we have another Conservation Fund partnership property. This is titled, we call it the Turkey Ridge Tract. It's in Yancey County. There is an acreage area in the right up there. We're anticipating about 752 acres. This would be the creation of a new game land in the Northern Mountains where state-owned game land is lacking. You can see the fairly proximate Pisgah game land to the east there. This would be an addition of some state-owned game land. The tax value is right at $2.6 million. The approximate asking price to WRC would be in the ballpark of $500,000. You can see there's quite a bit of bargain sale that will come with this at a later date if we propose phase two. The biological overview of the property, it's a very unique property. It has 10 ponds, each one ranging from about 1 to 5 acres in size. At least 4 of the ponds are really suitable for fishing. We had quite the crowd go out and survey or take a look at this property. We had our Inland Fisheries Division, Land and Water Access Division, and Engineering Division represented. So we believe the ponds currently have populations of some largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, bluegill, as well as channel cat. The ponds can be fished in current condition. There are also a plethora of game species present: wild turkey, deer, black bear, gray squirrel. SGCN species on the property include the pygmy salamander, hellbender, Appalachian wood rats, as well as small-footed bats. And you can see in this next slide, well, you can't see it great, but the Cane River runs through this valley, and the property actually crosses the Cane River by bridge. The overall land investigation score for this property was a 4.8. It scored really well for public fishing, hunting, as well as existence of game species. It also scored really well for overall biodiversity. I'll pause here too. I know this was asked in the last one of the recent commission meetings, what the max overall score was in our scoring criteria, and it is 6. So this property did score pretty well at a 4.8. Potential funding sources include, for our side of the acquisition, will include wildlife restoration, PR dollars, as well as state funds. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Turkey Ridge tract.
To get a bargain sale this significant and have the potential of public use to be so high, I think it's one of those things you say it's a no-brainer. But does anybody have any questions? It's a big responsibility to take it on. But our financial commitment here is minimal. $500,000, and it's a $2 million, $3 million piece of property.
Why is that price so much lower than the tax value?
The Conservation Fund has.
It's a bargain sale, huge bargain sale. Bargain sale meaning that somebody else is putting up the money, they put the project together, they're a little bit short on it, they want us to end up with it anyway. And because we'll look after it and open it up to the public for use. So that's. Other questions?
One other thing I failed to mention, similar to Payne Branch tract, TCF has also worked on some adjacent lands. I think maybe in partnership with Mr. Tim Sweeney and 130 of Chatham. There's an additional 738 acres, partly to the north, some of it to the south, that will likely come as phase 2 of Turkey Ridge. They've called it Callaway Mountain. So that's likely to come at a later date, but we are processing both properties separately. But this has the potential to be, I think, right at a 1,300 acre game land with both properties.
So why did you say Payne property?
I said similar to the Payne Branch tract.
Yeah,
Yep, yes, sir.
absolutely, yeah, okay, good, yeah, good. Tim is big supporter. Okay, is there any other questions? Okay. Spencer Bay.
Our Spencer Bay tracts, they're in Hyde County. It's a large acquisition. It's roughly 2,966 acres. This is a partnership with the North Carolina Coastal Land Trust. The tax value of the property is right at 1.5 million. The approximate asking price is 660,000. This would be the WRC ask to come at a later date. The biological overview of the property, there's a large 214 acre submerged aquatic vegetation impoundment, saltwater impoundment, that we would likely utilize for our permanent waterfowl hunt program. The other portion of the property is predominantly tidal brackish marsh. The tract borders quite a few bays, Able Bay, Spencer Bay, Germantown Bay, Lightwood Snag Bay, as well as Rose Bay. And I mention all of those because they're either primary or secondary fishery nursery areas. So very important for the fish species there. 63 species of greatest conservation need have been identified in the area. And it got cut off there a little bit, but that one bullet point mentions that black ducks are likely to utilize some of that marsh area for nesting. So there's some habitat value in the terrestrial side as well. Potential uses for the property would be permit hunts on the impoundment, as well as waterfowl hunting on the perimeter of the other 2 tracts. This detailed map gives you a better picture of what we're working with. There is road access to the tract where we have the 214 acre impoundment. here. The other two tracks do not have road access and will be by boating access only. I want to mention, I talked with staff quite a bit. I waterfowl hunt myself, so I know that public land bank hunting opportunities for waterfowl hunting are very limited in Hyde County and in Dare County. So these other two peninsulas that do not have any road access, that bank hunting will mean a lot to our waterfowl hunting population in Hyde County and the many people that travel to Hyde County to hunt waterfowl. The overall land investigation score is a 2.878. Scored well for hunting and viewing as well as biodiversity and our SGCN species. Potential grants and funding sources include wildlife restoration funds, and staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Spencer Bay tracks.
Blow up that duck impoundment. Can you do that? Can you? I think that what we're end up paying for this duck impoundment is probably worth that. But
I'm sure they can.
I'd like to you to comment on how the general public is going to be able to use the shoreline there for duck hunting. Obviously, you got a scissor rig, whatever boat, you know, that speaks for itself. But you said something about shoreline hunting. You have to have a permit for it. I mean, are we really, is there any more opportunity there than it's already there?
So this is
Because we own it.
This is currently privately owned. It would likely be purchased by a hunt club, and usage of the impoundment as well as the other two tracks without access would likely be exclusive to another hunt club that would be interested in this. Access to those two tracks will be by boat only. So somebody would have to take the boat out, pull up on the bank, set their decoys up and hunt from the bank. But that
Do I
is,
have to have a permit to do that?
no, sir.
And what about now? Who, just because, I mean, somebody is a private owner, but who's gonna keep me from doing that? Okay. So life goes on. All right, so is that Cypress? Is that the shoreline? I mean, is that?
It's mainly marsh, so like lowland grass type habitat. And one detail that we gathered after our meeting last week, we mentioned that house. There's a small hut house hunting lodge on the property. It sits on stilts. That house has very strong R3 potential for R3 program for disabled sportsman hunts, for youth hunts. Our staff yesterday mentioned that it would be set up really well to have folks come in, have supper, spend the night, wake up, cooking breakfast, and then they're not driving from Raleigh, you know, at midnight to get there for a morning waterfowl hunt. It would be
Where's that house?
the house is in the area of the southwest corner of that impoundment. And there's a boat ramp there as well. So if I'm not
Show up
mistaken,
very well.
yeah. But we do have ambitions to use that house, and that was something staff are pretty excited about that I failed to mention last week, but
Well, obviously, it's a really special piece of property, and having that impoundment there, and that's a bonus, having that house down there where kids can get there. Does anybody have any questions that, like?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a quick comment. I'm somewhat familiar with that piece of property. One thing is, if you look at it just the way it's laid out, no matter which direction the wind blows there, you got good duck hunting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of these peninsulas, a lot of these things that are hooks out there, that if you've got a certain kind of wind, it's not even worth going. You look at the way that's laid out, you've got good hunting no matter what it is. So that's an important piece of that most people aren't aware of.
That's good information, thank you. Quick question for Wes, how big is that impoundment? I got a question.
214 acres.
What's that worth?
Saltwater impoundment,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. Well, in the first place, you couldn't get a permit to dig it anymore now.
No, that's what I mean,
So,
yeah.
that makes it worth a lot.
And it's big and it's, anyway,
And that doesn't show it, but there are a lot of potholes out there. That's a great black duck spot.
Who owns the piece now? Who's the seller?
It's Wolfpack Partnership LLC currently owns it. And I believe they utilize it for hunting purposes. So it would likely sell to another hunt club or hunt LLC. If,
Why they sold it to us such low price?
so Coastal Land Trust, I showed our,
Absolutely, I can't even
the asking price that I'm showing is our anticipated asking price. With Coastal Land Trust, they have fundraised quite a bit for this project. They have a $1.5 million coastal wetland grant, as well as a $1 million North Carolina Land and Water Fund grant. So our 660 would just be pushing them to the finish line, kind of the final need in their funding plan.
So that's not the price, that's just the part that would, what are the total price they're asking?
I believe it was right at 3 million in that
Okay,
ballpark.
down,
Yeah,
down.
Yeah, that.
yeah.
Hey, man, we need 6 of us all to buy.
And we'll definitely have.
No,
Yes, sir.
we get in trouble if we were to do that also.
So how long before we're gonna have permit hunting on the duck and
Buy. It's a deal.
Mr. Sandberg.
The house is located at the northwest.
We need this to be
Northwest.
closed on
It's right
by
where the
duck
road
season next
comes
year.
down and
Wes, I got another question for
This
you. You've
corner,
done some
and then the
conservation
road
and
runs
stuff.
down to
Do
the
you put any
southwest side.
value on
The house is at the
sequestration of
northwest.
carbon and cypress? The cypress roots and
As far as that piece of property would go?
or just in general?
No, I mean, that whole thing is
Smoke and
so
mirrors.
subjective. I mean, you can have a piece of property that's next door to your place and it'll qualify and the next one won't. I mean, it is very difficult to.
Well, there's a whole lot of that going on there. So
Oh.
anyway, we're not
Oh.
putting any value on it. Yes, excuse.
That's good. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rating's lower than normal. Is that due to, I guess it says it's hot well, but what about, I've seen climate change affect ratings before. Was that taken into account here?
I believe you're correct. Some saltwater intrusion, sea level rise potential there. I think that. And I think limited access to those other 2 tracks, it just didn't have a great access number, being that it was boating access only. Yeah, that was part of it.
Those are irregularly flooded brackish marshes there, so they're not as low as some of the marshes, so it's some hope. But like Wes said, a lot of waterfowl youth, year round out there, you got nesting black ducks, and those potholes haven't flown that a lot. That's a great place for teal, gaddle, et cetera, and then, bluebills, like you guys call them scoff, use those bays like crazy. Great project.
Really? Okay, we're good. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, John.
Ben, when you look at these properties, do you carry the drone with you to look around and even here and also up in the mountains and whatever else you use it?
Oftentimes we do not. Oftentimes we have staff that go out and they put boots on the ground and they walk the majority of the property or visit it by boat if that's the better route. But that is that tactic may have been used in the past. I know we have the resources if we need to use that tactic. It would give us some very good pictures of the lay of the land if we utilize that. But most of the time it's hiking. Yes, sir.
Okay. This is the Bernie.
Marine Road track.
Marine, okay.
Yes, sir. So this is a 40-acre property in Brunswick County. It would be in addition to Juniper Creek game land. The tax value is $120,000. We don't have an approximate asking price just yet. We would order an appraisal and communicate that with the landowner. Biological overview. This will bring access to a previously inaccessible portion of Juniper Creek game land. Conservation of upland pine habitat adjacent to the game land. From our phase 1 right up, there's quite a bit of upland pine on this area of Juniper Creek that currently we're very limited in what we can do with prescribed fire as well as our timber management thinnings. So being able to access this side of the game land will open up a lot of improved habitat management. Acquisition will also secure connectivity of 2 natural areas determined by Natural Heritage Program. There are 20 SGCNs that are likely to be present on the property. The potential uses will be increased access for hunting as well as administrative access for our staff managing the land. The overall land investigation score is a 2.328. It scored well for compatibility with adjacent lands, as well as connectivity of existing conservation lands. And potential funding sources will include the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, Wildlife Restoration Funds, as well as state funds. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Vereen Road tract.
DC is in Brunswick County because notation says Blake.
Brunswick County? What do you-
Yeah, I believe this was in Brunswick.
That's in Brunswick.
Yeah, I know, but the agenda says Bladen County.
Must be an error there. Apologies.
But it is in Brunswick County.
It is in Brunswick, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Make sure the agenda says Bladen.
Brunswick. Sorry about that.
You know, being that it's opening up that access on that side, that's not, doesn't have any, in itself is significant value, and we saw no problem with this at all. You know, it's kind of a, we're gonna kind of see what asking price will be and see what the appraisal will be, but how will we handle that? Will you bring that back as phase 2 as a concrete number at that time?
Correct.
Do we
Yes,
have
sir.
to come back and look at it again before we put it to phase 2? I mean, are we giving you a blank check?
No, sir, not yet. We'll order an appraisal once if we receive phase 1 approval. We'll use that appraisal, present the owner with an offer, and we'll begin rounding up our funding plan from there. And once the funding plan is complete, it'll come back to the board as a complete phase 2 with an appraised value to inform the price and a complete funding package.
Well, committee liked it, so unless anybody has any objections, we're gonna push it forward. Okay? Lee Track.
Another coastal tract, this tract is in Bladen County. It is 11 acres. It would be in addition to Suggs Mill Pond game land. The tax value is approximately $20,806. Biological overview of the property is increased access to Suggs Mill Pond game land. This acquisition is, its biggest selling point is access. You'll see that in the detail map here in a second. There is some mature longleaf pine on the property, and this better access will allow for better management of those longleaf pine communities. There are 30 SGCNs present on the tract, and about 190 foot of Lake Run stream passes through the tract, so there's some stream protection there. And potential uses include increased access for management and restoration of these native longleaf pine communities. It scored at a 2.4. It scored well for access and compatibility with the adjacent game land there. And potential funding sources include NC Land and Water Fund, Wildlife Restoration Funds, and state funds. We anticipate this being a, I don't want to call it, it's not a cheap acquisition, but likely to be less than 50,000. So we'll assess our funding plan when that appraisal comes in. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of the lead tract.
Again, that access is key. So, committee didn't have any issues. Anybody have any more questions? I have one question. Overall land investigation score 2.4. What's the most we get? 5?
6.
6. And so why didn't it score any higher? Why does not access score higher in the scoring?
I think with this being a smaller tract, the overall conservation and biodiversity value was lower. This tract, like I said, is primarily for access, so it scored top tier for access, but that was really one of the only categories that it scored well in.
So basically, we just have to be mindful that access doesn't score very high, but obviously it's extremely valuable. Okay, all right, now moving along, Kelly Cove.
So this is our final phase 1 today. It's a 95-acre tract in Macon County. This tract is currently enrolled in our Game Lands program. It's a partnership with Mainspring Conservation Trust. It would be in addition to Needmore Game Land. The asking price is set at $224,000. This is another very, very significant bargain sale. And we would likely see no agency funds put into the project. It would likely be funded through Land and Water Fund. It's a very important wildlife corridor between Nantahala and Needmore Game Land. It's also fully protecting the entirety of Gold Mine Creek there, which is chock full of SGCN species, as well as several state endangered, threatened, and at-risk species, including Appalachian elktoe, slipper shell mussel, Tennessee club shell, spot fin chub, banded sculpin, and wounded darter. The tract is also very rich in game species. Majority of the tract is upland. There are some bottomland areas already enrolled in game land, so potential use in our ownership will include hunting, fishing, bird watching opportunities. This tract scored exceptionally well at a 5.878. Scored well for access improvement, quality habitat, and hunting opportunities. I didn't list it, but also presence of SGCN species. Potential funding sources will include a NC Land and Water Fund grant. Staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Kelly Cove tract. And again, another excellent example of a partnership. This one was with Mainspring Conservation Trust.
What did you say about funding, about bargain sale? Did you mention, said something about it?
Yeah, it'll come at a very significant bargain sale. But Mainspring Conservation Trust did apply for a Land and Water Fund grant that was awarded, and that will cover the acquisition in full. That grant was assigned to us, so this is coming forward as an acquisition.
I mean, this is a special piece of property.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, move on.
All right, we can switch gears a little bit. We've got our phase 2 land acquisitions now. These will be exhibits N1 through N8 tomorrow. And we'll start with a couple access tracks, fishing access. Our first is the Lakey Creek Farm Tract. It'll be exhibit N1. This is a 5.5 acre tract in Macon County, another partnership with Mainspring Land Trust. It is a property that has good access and opportunities for public fishing area. The tax value is set at $451,000. They are giving us a very, very hefty bargain sale at a asking price of $39,802. This will provide some WRC ownership along the Little Tennessee River. It is adjacent to Needmore Game Land, and acquisition will provide some riparian buffer there, which will in turn benefit some state listed aquatic species. Hellbender and mud puppy are likely to occur in this section of the Little Tennessee. And potential uses will be river access for float and wade fishing, as well as parking area. You can see the tract outlined in red in the eastern side of that meander in the river. The overall land investigation score was a 3.731. It scored well for fishing, boating access, and habitat restoration. Acquisition plan, we do not have an appraisal to inform this acquisition. Our state property office reviewed the property because it's coming at such a significant bargain sale and it's well below tax value. We're not required to order an appraisal for this one. See another typo there. The acquisition will be 39,802 acres, so please disregard the 36,802. Total stewardship costs are estimated to be at $500 for boundary, and the total revenue estimate is at $0. The staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Lakey Creek Farm Tract.
I'm just curious as to why the tax value for 6 acres is $451,000.
The only thing that I can assume here is the waterfront property to the Little Tennessee, and land in Macon County is high value. Most land in the mountain, especially the western region of the mountains, is pretty high value at the moment. And I think they did a recent tax assessment too, if I'm not mistaken. So that's probably why it's in line, probably not far from market value.
It's river frontage and road frontage.
Yeah.
Even on the small tract.
$100,000 an acre.
Yeah. So is there a lot of development around it already, or?
There's some residential development around it. I wouldn't say the parcel density is too dense, too extremely dense, but That has happened, a lot of residential properties along Little Tennessee.
Yep.
In this area, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm glad it's a farm sale.
I realize we have a process to go
Good
through
spot
when
for a
we buy
depot.
properties. But it's, to me, it's pretty painstaking and slow. Is there, can we speed up things for better purchases or, and I'd hate for us to lose some of these good parcels because we have to move so slowly. Is that a state function or is that a function of us?
Yeah, it's a complicated question to ask. I think we move as fast as we can move. And bargain sales move a lot quicker than if we have to seek funding.
Yeah.
The funding sources, hang on, when the funding sources are complicated, it takes longer to close it.
Yeah.
So it's all about where the money comes from.
Yeah, it's just.
Yes, sir.
That's where the local land trust really step in. They know it takes us a lot longer. They can act faster sometimes and move things along to us. But they're more in a position to act quickly to take advantage of an opportunity, knowing that we have to go through a long drawn out process.
It's a good fail safe, Brad, and I'm glad you pointed that out to address the problem you just mentioned, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are ways to fill in those cracks.
Yeah. The appraisal process that we have to go through is extensive, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, it's a great question and there's lots of different ways to look at it. Or answers to it. Okay, let's move.
All right. Our next property is another access tract for the New River. This is called the Southport New River Access. You saw this property last year as a phase 1 presentation. It is a 20-acre tract in Ashe County. This will be and currently is a access and public fishing area. It has been in our program through an agreement with the landowner for some time. The landowner voiced an interest in selling the property to solidify state ownership and solidify that access area there. This is a partnership with Blue Ridge Conservancy in our northern mountain region. Tax value is $122,600. Approximate asking price is $20,000. This, like I mentioned, will solidify this access point that we have put some funds into through time. We have no interest in offloading it. It sees a lot of use. I had fished from this access area myself. It's a really pretty area along the New River, if you've never been out there, and it's hatchery supported, if I'm not mistaken. I believe there's the late harvest segment. Yep. It scored pretty well at a 3.55. It scored well for fishing and boating access, habitat connectivity, as well as benefit to the local economy and quality of life in Ashe County. It appraised at $262,500. You're seeing this very significant bargain sale due to some donated value from the landowner, as well as a Land and Water Fund grant that Blue Ridge Conservancy acquired or was awarded in last year's Land and Water Fund cycle. We would be purchasing at $20,000 using WRC license receipts. Total stewardship costs are estimated at $4,750. That will be for a kiosk, routine maintenance, as well as gravel. And there is no revenue. So staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Southport New River access.
Yeah, it's an interesting piece of property. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's access and it's very special. And when it comes to as a bargain sale, it's not much to say except move on. That's a great piece of property. Okay. SIP gap access again.
Yes, sir. So we'll have 2 SIP gap tracks to look at today. Both tracks are adjacent to each other. We'll be processing these tracks as 2 separate transactions. The first is the access tract at 12.58 acres in Graham County. It's an addition to Nantahala game land. The property is important for access. It has some old hardwood forest on it. The property as a whole has great game species, including turkey, black bear, deer, squirrel, and ruffed grouse. That's one you don't see very often. So awesome to see conservation in an area where there's still some ruffed grouse population. There are also various songbirds, salamanders, and small mammals present. Potential uses will include hunting, bird watching, wildlife photography, and general nature study. Overall land investigation score for this tract is 4.581. It scored well for terrestrial species, SGCN species, habitat diversity, as well as hunting and viewing, as well as access improvement to this portion of Nantahala. We will be acquiring at a very significant bargain sale of, actually, let me restate that. This will be a purchase for $60,000 using a NC Land and Water Fund grant. This is a mistake in the presentation today, the exhibit that we will vote on tomorrow. It is correct. I've confirmed that. So this will be purchased solely with a NC Land and Water Fund grant, no agency dollars included. Total stewardship costs are estimated at $9,500.
Yeah, that's, anybody have any questions? All good.
All right, here's our second SIMP tract. The second end of the transaction, this will be exhibit N4. It's 494 acres in Graham County. A lot of the same biological overview. One thing I mentioned here that I didn't mention in the access tract is there is great habitat for golden wing warbler, as well as cerulean warbler areas, as well as grouse priority areas. There's Rhines Creek, North Fork Beach Creek that run through the property. A lot of the same uses: hunting, bird watching, wildlife photography. The overall land investigation score for the property is 4.581. It scored well for terrestrial species, SGCN species, as well as habitat diversity and hunting. This property appraised at $244,000. This is another bargain sale from Mainspring Conservation Trust at $100,000. We are proposing to use PR, Wildlife Restoration Funds, to purchase the tract. And the 5-year estimated stewardship is $30,000 for boundary posting. And I didn't mention this, but in the maps, you can see our access tract outlined in yellow and the main tract outlined in red. And staff recommend phase 2 approval.
I'd like to point out that here's a big piece of mountain land at around $500 an acre. So
Where is
it's
that?
appraised value. So
Oh, you wanna look at that one too?
Graham County is more reasonable land prices.
Good point.
Again, does anybody have any questions about this? I have a question just in general. I'm seeing mainstream conservation group coming up significantly in this. And all these access grants and lands, et cetera. Tell me about where are they located? I don't know them well.
So a lot of their work region, you'll see a lot of properties on Needmore, Nantahala. They work in the southern mountain region of North Carolina. We've been very involved with them the last couple of years. Their staff are very ambitious in pursuing and conserving lands. And like many of our land trusts, like Commissioner Standback mentioned, they do secure quite a few of these properties to prevent sale to a private buyer that may not be a conservation buyer. So we always voice our gratitude to these land trusts, but today especially, we're seeing the product of a lot of their good work.
They changed their name a few years ago. That was formerly the Land Trust for the Little Tennessee.
Yep.
That's their primary area.
Where's their office?
Franklin.
Pardon?
Franklin.
Oh, yeah. Well, they weren't on our list to invite them to our little luncheon we had several months ago. But boy, they have sure shown up today.
They mad you didn't invite them to lunch.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. That's right. Probably need to go up there and take them out to lunch. Okay, all right. Well, what we got? Keep moving.
Our next acquisition is the Doll tract. This is 217 acres in Caldwell County. This is in addition to our Buffalo Cove game land. The tax value of the property is right at $530,000. The asking price is anticipated to be around $317,000. The biological overview of the property, it's about 13 acres of open field that we'll be able to manage for early successional habitat, potentially some dove field that we don't have a ton of in our mountain region. Made up of mainly old Appalachian oak forest with some southern Appalachian cove forest. This is there's a lot of protection along the Green Rock Branch, around 3,300 foot of riparian protection there. So this was you can guess, a land and water fund property that they funded this past cycle. Species that we are excited to protect there are the endangered brook floater, as well as the dwarf heartleaf plant. SGCNs present on the tract include box turtle, timber rattlesnake, wood thrush, as well as worm-eating warbler. Potential uses include hunting and other outdoor activities. Overall score of 3.8. It scored well for connectivity. You can see that this does fill in a corner of Buffalo Cove, so we do consider this an in-holding. This is filling in an in-holding, and there will be hunt opportunities as well. Access to the property is primarily administrative access only. This tract does mean a lot to our management staff in our northern mountain region for future management of this section of Buffalo Cove game land. We propose to purchase the property in partnership with Foothills Conservancy using wildlife restoration funds. We would use $317,625 of PR. The other portion of the acquisition is made up of that Foothills and Water Fund grant. Estimated 5-year stewardship costs are $7,050 for boundary posting, and staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Doll tract.
So if we're getting help from Foothill Conservancy, why are we paying the full price?
No, we're paying about roughly 50% of the acquisition. That land and water fund grant that they were.
Tax value, okay, so the appraised value, we don't know yet.
It was appraised roughly
But it says asking price.
That's our contribution. That's what Foothills asked of us in this acquisition. So the property did appraise at $2,750 an acre.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
They're asking price of us, not the homeowner or the landowner. Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, it's still $317,000, and I'll make a comment that, like we have recently when something like this comes up, there's so much land out there that touches what we have, and opportunities come up all the time, but that, is it, I mean, obviously this is a good deal. We're getting it, we're involved in it, and touches what we got, but we've got a lot of other opportunities out there that are in better locations. Anyway, I don't think there's any objections there. Okay.
All right, our next tract is the Sheckett tract. This is a partnership with the Conservation Fund. This is a 12-acre tract at William H. Silver Game Land, often referred to as Silver's Game Land. We don't have tax value for the tract. Our approximate asking price from TCF is $30,000. We'll get to that in a minute. The biological overview of the property, the tract will fill in a significant inholding within Silver Game Land. You'll see that a little bit better in the detail map. It will reduce habitat fragmentation in this area of silvers, which we all know is pretty important for our elk population out there. Majority of the tract is mature forest. There's great biodiversity. It's accessed from Sheepback Mountain Road. And this will be an acquisition in an area with some high conservation ownership. Potential uses will be hunting. There is an access component as well as elk viewing. This property isn't too far from Maggie Valley, which has received a lot of, I think, positive press in the news for all of its elk viewing opportunities. Sheckett tract scored at a 3.117. It scored well for habitat connectivity, as well as buffering, filling and inholding, and conservation of highly developable land. In the detail map, you can see there's quite a bit of residential development in the area. So we're excited to scoop this one up. We're excited that TCF scooped this one up.
Yep. This is big.
Property appraised at $110,000. And our refined number for purchase is 25,000. We'll be using our wildlife restoration Pittman Robertson dollars. Our estimated stewardship over the next 5 years will be boundary establishment at $400. And staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Sheckett tract.
Good. Well, slowly but surely, we're filling that gap between the sheep back and silvers, and this is another piece of the puzzle. So, for unless anybody's question, section. Okay, moving on.
This is our 7th phase 2 today. These are the Bay River tracts in Pamlico County. This is a partnership with North Carolina Coastal Land Trust. This property is coming as a donation. Full donation. Coastal Land Trust did quite a bit of fundraising on this, and we also partnered on some NOAA funding last year. The property does have public access from Lynch's Beach Loop Road. Habitat communities are dense on the property, great habitat, mainly freshwater marsh to coastal fringe evergreen forest. There's some upland ridge on the property as well that has some mature longleaf pine and oak. And opportunities will include hunting, fishing, and wildlife viewing. You can see this is a little bit disjunct from the rest of our Goose Creek game land, but this is proposed to be in addition to Goose Creek. The overall land investigation score came in at a 4.093. It scored well for access, hunting opportunity, and habitat diversity. This is a full donation from Coastal Land Trust. And we're estimating stewardship costs at $62,554, which is a hair higher than we tend to see, but this will be essentially an establishment of access on a brand new tract of Goose Creek game land. So we're establishing boundary as well as a parking lot, gate, and we went ahead and included some expenses for prescribed fire. We would plan to include this in our prescribed fire program. Zero revenue, and staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Bay River tracts.
A lot of work went into that, putting that together. And but it's a bargain. It's perfect location. I don't see any objection. Anybody got any thoughts? Objection? Okay. Sleepy Creek.
Have another donation. This is a 1,616 acre tract on Holly Shelter game land in Pender County. This is in addition, as I mentioned, Holly Shelter game land, tax value at roughly $1.8 million. The asking price. This will be another donation. This is from the Nature Conservancy. So this is a big project that's been in the works for quite some time. We're very thankful for our partnership with TNC on this one.
Yep.
Biological overview. The site does offer forage habitat for our nearby red cockaded woodpecker clusters. This acquisition will improve administrative access and will improve our prescribed fire operations. And the tract hasn't had fire on it in quite some time, so we anticipate a lot of habitat benefit when we reintroduce fire. Large portions of the tract consist of Cosin and Carolina Bay vegetation. There's about 300 acres of upland longleaf pine on the ridge as well. Potential uses will be hunting, trapping, and wildlife viewing opportunities. It's scored at a 4.067. Scored well for species restoration, compatibility with adjoining land, and hunting opportunity. And acquisition plan, donation, 5-year stewardship estimated at $39,485 with zero revenue. The staff recommend phase 2 approval.
Committee didn't have any problems. Anybody else here have any thoughts or questions about it? Again, pretty significant piece of property, and it's a bargain sale and donation for the Nature Conservancy. It's all good. We could sit here and really, I will ask one thing. Is that a duck impoundment that is on the outside right there in the middle of that property right there? That's we're not getting
Not to my knowledge.
a lake of some sort,
Like solar panels.
I believe it is solar panels.
okay, I can't see it.
So
Okay,
that's
good, let's move on. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Additional topic.
yeah, so moving forward, we've got,
Okay, you want to do a formal vote?
yeah, good point. Yep. So Commissioner Barry, staff would like to recommend exhibits N1 through N8 for approval and a formal vote tomorrow, but we would like to recommend,
So we want a motion on those now?
let's take a motion on phase ones. I misspoke, so.
Okay.
There are 8 phase ones
I can
today.
present a motion to approve all phase ones as discussed.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, committee approves that.
All right, we'll have a formal vote on phase 2s tomorrow. My mistake. Additional topics, we have 3 additional topics today. These will be exhibits 01, 02, and 03. The first will be a building disposition request at Holly Shelter Depot. We have an old storage building there. You can see it's located in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. The structure used to be the old office for Holly Shelter Depot. It has transitioned to sign storage because we really didn't want to put anything in there that could decompose with a lot of the leaks that we had. The structure is very deteriorated, and in short, we recommend disposition of the building, and we will likely eventually put up another pole shed or storage building in its
We
place.
need to take a motion on this tomorrow.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, pretty obvious. Let's move on.
All righty.
Okay.
Another look at the building. Map didn't show it well. Our second phase 2 or other property matter exhibit is exhibit 02. This is the Ledford Chapel disposition in Clay County. This encroachment was identified in the summer of 2021. The property owners there had constructed a concrete driveway, a brick road, and a concrete seawall that were permanent infrastructures that could not be moved. So we then negotiated to dispose of this 0.054 acres. Property owners agreed to that. The property, or that 0.054 acres, appraised at $18,900. They agreed to that purchase price. So staff would like to recommend approval of this disposition of 0.054 acres.
And that's what it prays for. I don't think we have, that's a fair deal. Anybody ever, I mean, does anybody have any other thoughts? Okay.
All right, our final other property matter is a DOT easement request in Rowan County at our Yadkin River Game Land. This is a bridge rerouting project. DOT is requesting for WRC to permanently dispose of 0.2 acres of permanent right-of-way. The compensation is calculated at $596.80. And staff recommend approval of this permanent disposition to DOT.
Okay. I don't think we, it is what it is. Now, if we wanted to, as we discussed in our committee meeting, if we wanted to ask for an appraisal, then, which is probably proper protocol, then we could do so. But we need to discuss that as a committee, just how far we want to take these things. At this point, I don't think they're going to get it eminent domain or however it is, but they're going to end up with it. But the compensation seems to be rather low. Is there any justification for only getting $600 for that much? Well, 0.2, what is that, acres, supposed to 0.2 permanent right of way? What does that mean? But I think for the sake of time and for this issue, but I would like to bring it up in one of our meetings as to, it's not so long, about going forward, should we request an appraisal for these DOT easements that they seem to put the value on and we agree to?
So one thing I'd point out is oftentimes DOT does send a recommended purchase price. SPO, our state property office, does review that. They compare it to market value of land in the local area. Our state property office ultimately approves of these and they deem it as fair compensation. This one in particular, DOT did not recommend this value. this Yadkin River game land. This was part of the Alcoa acquisition, so our state property office was able to utilize the appraised value when we purchased those tracts. I believe this is part of the 2018 acquisition. And that's how compensation was
So you're
calculated.
saying that the state property office said grace over this and agreed to that number?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Good. Well, let's move on.
Can I ask one quick
Okay,
question?
Stu,
Dave?
yeah.
Yeah,
Move on.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear. That's a 0.2 acre parcel. It just says 0.2 permanent right of way, so 0.2 acre.
Correct. Yes,
So
sir.
the actual per acre price of that would be close to $3,000 per acre.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
Any other questions? Okay,
So that's our final other property matter. We can move on towards additional topics if you'd like.
yeah, you got, what do you got?
Yes, sir. So, in our pre-meeting last week and then some recent discussions, Chairman Barry had requested that we pull together some numbers of some of our recent land acquisition successes. And so we pulled together some numbers from 2015 up till 2022. There were a total of 132 projects. Every last one of those projects came through this board and through the LAP committee. Y'all reviewed those, approved them, passed them through. So that's a large workload that the committee has accomplished. Out of those 132 projects, it was right at 62,000 acres acquired. And we also have a breakdown of our federal funds used, our PR dollars used in those projects. And we used just under 50%. It's actually right at 49% PR federal dollar funding in those 62,000 acres acquired. And we're able to keep our PR contributions below 50% over this period of time because of that word that has echoed throughout this entire meeting partnership. Our partnerships with our land trust are the reason we're able to be so cost effective with our federal PR dollars and land acquisitions. Another overview I'd like to give.
Let me comment on that.
Yes, sir.
And it's a staff comment. This stuff doesn't happen without the excellent staff that we have. They vet these things. We give them guidelines. You know, we've taken different directions about what we want to see come before us. And you guys are bringing it in. The bargain sales are adding up. And the outside funding is adding up where it's not so tough on PR funds. And my hat goes off to you guys for pulling all that together. So kudos, and it's a big deal, and people don't have a clue what you guys do. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you all for the board support. I know a lot of state programs aren't so fortunate to have a very aggressive land acquisition program, and I think our state's very fortunate to have one. I mean, this is a lot of public access acres added for the public. So got a quick overview. This is a dashboard that one of our GIS analysts created. And speaking of GIS analysts, every map that you see, we have staff that produce those maps, keep the template very standard and consistent. This is another product of their work. It breaks down our commission managed acres. So out of 2.1 million acres and 93 game lands, WRC owns approximately 538,000 of those acres. The other, I guess, 1.5 million acres are managed by WRC, but ownership is made up of federal ownership. A lot of that's U.S. Forest Service. Some of it's Duke Energy. Some of it is still owned by a local land trust, and it's enrolled in our Game Lands program. So it gives you a good picture of all the land that our staff manage, and the land that our agency as a whole is involved in overseeing. Happy to answer any questions on that. All in all, our staff stay busy.
Did you distribute that in the packet?
That was in the iPad packet, correct? Yes, sir.
No, I'm talking about before today.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
I missed it.
It's pretty exciting.
That's why I didn't get it. If you would send that to commissioners.
Yes, sir.
I would like to have that information.
Send it to the whole group.
The committee got it. If
Yes,
you
sir.
send that to all the commissioners.
Yes, sir.
I think that'd be good. I see several of them that he won't.
And this is linked on our webpage, our WRC webpage as well. I'll send that link, and that's easy to forward around if you'd like to share it. Yep. Yes, sir.
It prompts a lot of questions. We don't have time for them, but it's pretty impressive, what we do and how much land we cover and what we look after. It's need to take note of that every now and then.
It's also impressive that we only paid $876 an acre. Well, that's 62,700.
Right on.
That's the first much.
True, a lot of bargain selling there. You're right.
Okay, you done with that?
Yes, sir.
Anything else? You got, okay, a couple
Squared
of
up.
things here. One thing that came out of this meeting, when we were sitting around talking, is that we have got a really cool opportunity with, putting a program together to study access to our game lands. We got lots of game lands we can't get to because they're on the other side of the mountain or whatever. So it's going to be, going forward, a new proponent of looking at this land is that, you know, do we need to consider better access to it? In some cases, you want to leave it like it is.
You don't want.
You don't want access. I get that. But you take like, I believe it was Gold Rock down the coast. It would be a great access to come in. We studied that one for a little while. So, yeah, sure. But there's some opportunities out there for the general public to use some game lands they can't get to because there's no way to get there. So that's kind of, we'll see where that goes. Okay, you know, it's taking time. We're not gonna take up some of this stuff, but we are pushing forward on the new game land initiative in areas that we feel like are underserved. We just talked about doing another push. We did get a bite on one of the master plan land acquisition letters we sent out, and it looks like it may end up in 3,000 or 4,000 acres if it all comes together. So just giving you a little progress on something that's happening. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, we're all tired of hearing about land. Thank you very much. And
No, I want to compliment you, Mr. Chairman, that we're 16 minutes ahead of schedule.
oh, you want to talk about that?
No, I wasn't giving you more time. I'm saying.
I get it. I
You
get
got
it.
this thing 16 minutes early.
Well,
very
thank
much.
you.
That was
Thank
a
you.
long
Thank you.
agenda. We appreciate it.
Kudos to Ben over here for keeping us on track.
To call the finance committee meeting to order. First, call on Margot Winkler for a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to do a roll call for Finance, Audit, and Compliance Committee members. Committee Chair Landon Zimmer. Committee Vice Chair Brad Stanback.
Here.
Committee Member David Hoyle. Committee Member John Coley. Committee Member Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Committee Member Mike Alford.
Here.
Mr. Vice Chair, you have a quorum.
Want to remind everyone this meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. Recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. And first, I'd like to call on Jason Cottle for financial status report.
Mr. Vice Chair, can I just take 1 minute of your time here? We'd just like to introduce Jason Cottle. He's our new CFO. Comes to us from the community college system. He's actually been with the agency for 10 years. Then we lost him to community colleges and we stole him back. So we're happy to have him. He knows the agency and he knows his stuff. And so Jason, welcome. And I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. We're going to begin with our financial status update, and this should look familiar to everyone by now. I've kept with the content and format of the presentations that everyone's accustomed to seeing at these meetings. What we've got before us is a year-over-year comparison of the year-to-date activity in the various revenue and expenditure types in both our general or operating fund and our capital improvement or capital projects funds. What I'd like to do is draw particular attention to any variances in excess of $1 million, either increase or decrease from the prior year. In the revenue category, we'll see that sales and services increased by about 2.8 million from the prior year. That is almost exclusively attributable to timber harvesting on WRC lands. Additionally, we see a slight decrease, about 6% in fees, licenses, and fines. As we know, we've benefited greatly during the pandemic from increased demand for folks to go outside and enjoy outdoor recreational activities. We knew that at some point in time, those increases would level off and we'd see things return to typical activity. And I think that's what's indicative of these numbers here. Large variances in the expenditure category in our general fund. We see personal services increase by about 1.3 million. That's predominantly salaries. You all know that the General Assembly granted a 3.5% legislative increase to state employees last year. That makes up the bulk of that. The remainder of that percentage change is likely salary adjustments, promotions, advancements within the agency. We see an increase as well, really pretty significant, about 40%, 1.7 million in capital outlay. That's due to acquisition of new trucks and boats this year. Looking at our capital improvement categories, we see a decrease in both expenditures and revenues, and those are correlated with one another. We've had a decrease in land acquisitions this year as compared to last year. And as such, the revenues that we receive from our private, state, and local partners to support those acquisitions would have decreased as well. Are there any questions about this data?
The 3.5% increase for the employees. that the
Yes.
State approved. Do we get that in allocation? Do we get?
We get it in an allocation proportional to our funding. So if we're getting roughly 25% of our total budget and appropriation, then only 25% of that increase would be supported by the General Assembly.
Hardly seem fair, does it?
That's a point of contention between us and them on a regular basis. All
So we
right.
have to go find, that's a good point, Commissioner. We have to go find revenue internally, provide those raises above and beyond what's funded, this is fully funded position.
That's exactly right. And
I want
historically,
everybody to understand that clearly, that the onus, and it's not, we're not required to give those raises. But if we didn't, we're probably gonna lose a pile of employees.
that's exactly right. Historically, those have been, when they do come, 1.5%, 2%. So if that's what we're basing our estimates on and we get hit with a 3.5 or next year 4.25, that is quite an obligation for the agency to have to cough up. Right. I will move next to, our endowment fund update. As of February 28th of 23, according to our most recent statement from BNY Mellon, there was $153,740,590.03. The allocation is currently split about 73% in equities, about 27% in bonds. We will present this tomorrow as part of Exhibit C, I believe. And the final point that I want to bring up, generally, we would explain our expendable income earned in the prior calendar year. This year, we did not earn any expendable income. That $21.8 million figure is a bit of a shocker, but it is consistent with overall market performance during this last calendar year. We will need a motion tomorrow to acknowledge and approve that no expendable interest income was earned in the prior year. Thank you, sir.
Are there any questions?
Hey, go back to the income statement.
Yes, sir.
Go back to the income statement. I mean, what the first line of revenues, the 55 million represents the first line of expense, where it says expenditures, 68 million represents.
So those are overall revenues and expenditures. The difference between what you see there on that top line and then what you see down there as total revenues.
Yeah.
There are these other financing sources, these last 4 or 5 lines. The way that the reporting system categorizes this data, those other items are generally listed further down the page. So if we take that 55 million revenue and add in those other sources, it comes back to that 108 million. The reason they're categorized differently, some of those other revenues are actually transfers from, say, endowment or from other WRC funding sources to our operating fund. So it's overstating if we look at the 108 million. We may be categorizing revenue here in the operating fund that we've already recorded as revenue elsewhere.
So let's just take the other financing sources, transfers in 40 billion. How many sources does that, what if we had we asked for the detail on that, it said 4 items or 24 items?
Most of it, I couldn't give you a figure. I'd have to go back to that and look. But most of what you see as transfers in is actually going to be transfers between our own agency budget codes, where we might move money from endowment to operating, from vessel receipts to operating, from license receipts to operating. Very little of that is actual transfers in from external sources.
As long as it works for you.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Next call on Steve Chase for audit and compliance.
Good afternoon, Mr. Acting Chairman and members of the group here. And I can see I need to up my attire with Jason wearing a tie now. So that'll be the next meeting. Anyways, I want to give you a brief update on audit activities since we last met, which was back in August. So getting on to this little rascal here. I have 5 items on the agenda, which I'll go through very briefly. First being the internal audit charter, the Bank of America, the works implementation, which is the P card system or the credit card system we're implementing, some civil rights reviews that were performed, a travel review, and the internal audit staffing status as it stands right now. So for the internal audit charter, and that it is a charter that tells you what internal audit is responsible for. It also tells me what the board is responsible for. So in the first column or first section here, you can see the board will, and this is right in from the charter. So it says approve the internal audit charter, which we'll do today, or Chairman Crump and Executive Director Ingram will sign to say, yes, we've readopted this. The second bullet point, the risk-based internal audit plan. So there are a lot of things going on, which you've heard this morning, and you know that a lot of moving parts, and one auditor can't possibly cover all of those parts to make sure that the internal controls are working, that nothing's leaking out the side. So we have to take a risk-based approach, which we had all the divisions and offices do a risk assessment, I think 1.5 years ago, and we're going to update that. So I'll be presenting the fiscal 24 audit plan here, I think at the next meeting. The third bullet is receive communications from the chief audit executive, which is me, or who is me, and how am I doing in relation to the audit plan. So right now, with the Bank of America Works project, because it touches all 560 P card holders at WRC, I have to make darn sure that nothing explodes or breaks, because I could have a whole division or office angry, and I don't want that to happen. So, but that's where I would tell you, I'm behind in the audit plan. I'm ahead of the audit plan. For you to make appropriate inquiries of management and the chief audit executive, determine whether there is any inappropriate scope or resource limitation. Crickets. Anyways, what that basically means is you want to make sure that I'm not being, shoved in a corner and not able to look at anything, ask any questions, and that's simply not the case. So the chief audit executive will communicate and interact directly with the commissioners, which obviously that's what I'm doing today. So I have reviewed the charter, Cam looked at it, and we haven't made any changes to it. So we'll just go ahead and have them sign. And every year I need to state that I have not been put in a corner, encumbered to not make any judgments or do any audits, or limited from access of anything. Because basically the charter says I have access to all books and records of the organization. All right, we'll move down to the Bank of America Works implementation. And what that is an online system for processing P cards. Every P card receipt has to have a general ledger and accounting number, a cost center, a grant. The way we currently do it, it's done with emails back and forth. So if you do a purchase, you email it to your supervisor, the supervisor emails it to finance, and it's, as we all know, we get a lot of emails get lost. Inefficient, right? So we're changing to this online system, which will make it a whole heck of a lot easier for everyone, right? So I've gotten good reports from the Education Division, which was the first division to implement this, and I've had good feedback saying, "Wow, it's so much easier. I can just go in, click on, the receipts are right there." So the goal is to have it in place by June 30th, all the divisions and offices. So that's 560 people that will be now using the work system to process their P cards. And let's see, the civil rights reviews. So because we receive federal money, we have to be compliant with their laws relating to civil rights, right? So we had U.S. Fish and Wildlife civil rights audit, and they basically come in and make sure that, and I'll generalize it. Everybody here, I think in this room, knows that there's a lot to civil rights and the laws that govern that topic. So they come in, they look, make sure that, you're communicating with your constituents and you give access. In our case, you're giving access to everyone for education, for hunter education, whatever the program is. You heard this morning people talk about programs that they're doing. Part of that is that we're making sure that everyone has an equal chance and opportunity to attend that hunter education course or go fishing or whatever it is, or duck hunting or whatever. So we received the report. There was just one observation, which will be answered by the end of this year. The second one was the Department of Homeland Security. And basically, they look, because they're obviously a federal agency, they have the same rules and regulations that they want us to follow. So there was a lot of splashover or common areas. That report is still pending. And I do want to point out, now there is perception that auditors only talk when there's something wrong. This is not compliant, this total is wrong and all that. Well, in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the transmittal letter to say, okay, we've completed your audit and blah, 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 blah. They gave us these summary of major accomplishments, which, and I just thought it important to call out that the agency has done these bullet points here to enhance the availability of WRC services. So, implementing the recording of the NCWRC, and obviously this is the work of a lot of people at the agency to make sure that, this stuff is getting designed and implemented here. So I thought that was just kind of cool that, I have good news to report. That's it for that slide. These are not minor, but just not as much breadth and depth to them. OSBM, Office of State Budget and Management, the Central Internal Audit Office offered all small audit shops across the state to do a review for us of our travel expenses. So every time I travel, I get subsistence for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and all that. So they are working on that, and they're working on the report. And last but not least is the internal audit staffing. I've been in, we have monthly meetings with OSBM and the Office of State Auditor. And in a number of, almost all or a number of those meetings, I've heard the small internal audit shops, of which I am one, small being 1 to 3 people. There's a request that those audit shops that are very small like that need to have additional audit resources, bring on 1 or 2 or whatever. Back in October, OSBM did a staffing analysis, which was included in the governor's recommended budget. to say, okay, these agencies need more auditors, basically. So, and in that request, that's in the budget, they said, you know, we need 2 more auditors, in addition to myself. So, I'm hopeful for that because there is a lot going on here, and I'm hoping that I need some help. Bottom line, and there is the redeployment of one WRC employee that is going to come and assist me because a lot of it is, you know, I'll call it the grunt work of getting in the records and pulling out stuff. So, but I'm very hopeful, and it would be a welcome thing to have another set of eyes to look at stuff and get audits done. And that is the end of my report. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I think it was the first slide you had where you had the audit charter. Those bullet points are not part of the charter. The actual charter itself, can we get a copy of that?
I thank you for mentioning, Commissioner Stone. I have copies for everybody here. I have 20 copies of the charter. It's a short read, 3 pages.
Okay, so you don't do a financial audit.
I do financial audit, yeah. And being a one-person shop, I'm kind of limited to what I can do. And right now, like I say, that my focus has been on this P-card, the Bank of Works implementation project, because that it will lessen the risk of fraud for one thing, and definitely make us more efficient. So
Do you make a statement about internal controls?
I do. There's also a separate program called the Eagle program, which looks at internal controls. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Steve, this commission has already approved that internal chart. And I see periodically approved. I mean, is there a set deadline for that?
There's not a set deadline. It does say periodically, because here's my rationale and reasoning, because I don't meet with folks here on a regular basis. I mean, 3 times a year, we're scheduled to meet in the formal meeting here. So I thought it would make sense to have it done yearly. Just as a reminder, again, if that, you know, is too much or burdensome, then
I'll just ask.
yeah, no, that was it's my reasoning for that. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Do we have any safeguards type of compliance that we're responsible for relative to consumer data in terms of licensing, what have you? We don't fall under, I know we don't fall under the Safeguards Act, but do we have any other type of data?
You mean as far as preserving like my address? and my-
Protecting data protection?
Well, there is the PCI payment card industry has rules surrounding the payment of that and the guarding or the safeguarding of those, you know, that transaction stuff, those numbers. As far as actually making sure that my address and phone number doesn't get published.
Or birth date or.
Or
social
birthday,
security
yeah,
number,
any
those types of
personally
things.
identifiable information, right? So I would think we do, but we'll get back to you on that.
No worries.
Make
Thank
sure.
you. Just curious. Appreciate it.
That personal identifying information is statutorily protected, and we comply with that.
Okay, thank you. That helps me then.
Thank you. Anything else? Good, thank you very much.
Any additional topics?
Pat, I just got a question, and this is just so have we had years in the past where we hadn't had transferable interest, or is this the first time we've ever had?
My knowledge is the first time we've had. Yeah. And I think that's a factor of just having so much on in equities this
Yeah,
year.
I didn't remember it in my time, just was curious to.
That was just no expendable income went into the fund this year. We still have a balance accumulated.
People can spend.
Yeah. Any additional topics, questions? Finance committee meeting adjourned.
Committee of whole will, come in.
Sure, my duties.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to call the meeting of the committee of the whole to order. And at this time, remind everyone the meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. With that being said, I call on Margot for roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do a roll call for our committee of whole of commissioners present. Monty Crump,
Here.
Tommy Fumble,
Here.
David Hoyle,
Here.
John Coley,
Here.
Wes Seegers,
Here.
Mark Craig, Tom Barry,
Here.
Brad Stanback,
Here.
Jim Ruffin,
Here.
Ray Clifton,
Here.
Kelly Davis, Steve Wyndham,
Here.
Landon Zimmer,
Here.
John Stone,
Here.
Hayden Rogers, John Alexander,
Here.
Tom Hayslip,
Here.
J.C. Cole,
Yeah.
Mike Alford.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Margot. And Carrie, it looks like you've got the entire agenda to yourself today. And so I'm not gonna worry about recognizing you at each individual heading.
Okay.
I'm just gonna let you get started
And I'll
and you
just keep
keep
going.
plowing until we get to the end. Is that okay with you?
That is fine.
Okay, the floor is yours, Carrie.
All right. So the first item we have for you today is Exhibit E. This is various rules in subchapter 10A that were determined to be necessary with substantive public interest and need to be readopted for the periodic review. So at tomorrow's meeting, staff will be requesting approval to notice these rules. So the first two rules are our petition rules. These rules set standards for petitioning the agency for rulemaking and govern our response to petitions. We are just proposing technical changes to these rules to update language and requirements to current standards. 10A1101 is our waiver rule. This is an outdated rule. We are proposing repeal of this rule because it regards movement of captive cervids, and those are no longer under the jurisdiction of the commission. So we'll be noticing that to repeal. 10A1201 is our emergency powers rule. This is the rule that we follow when managing for new cases of CWD. And we're just proposing technical changes to update the language and requirements in this rule. So those are all the rules that we'll be proposing to notice at tomorrow's meeting. Are there any questions on those minor changes? No?
Questions?
All right. Next, we have permanent rulemaking adoption for Gull Rock Game Land. This is exhibits F1 and F2. Proposed amendments to this rule are necessary to correct a typographical error that was made that removed the word Tuesday from the December bear season. We corrected that this past season with a temporary rule, so this will just be the permanent rule that replaces that. We did receive 2 public comments. There was a public hearing held on February 8th, 2 comments in support of this rule change. The amended rule text is in exhibit F2. Staff will be recommending adoption of this amendment at tomorrow's meeting. Are there any questions on this one? All right. Moving on, next we have exhibit G. This is for a petition received by the executive director on February 14th for changes to rule 10D0220, which is Columbus County Game Land in Columbus County. And the petition is requesting to prohibit the hunting of deer with the use of dogs on the portion of the Wananish, sorry, tract. It's in there, south of NC 214. This petition was sent to you by the executive director for your consideration on February 22nd in accordance with our petition rules. And at this point, the commission is required to either deny the petition or to initiate rulemaking, which would be to notice it. So tomorrow, staff will recommend voting on initiating rulemaking by noticing text of the rule, opening the comment period, and holding a public hearing for the proposed changes. Are there any questions on this one?
Is there any chance with Barry contacting us? Is it too late if he wanted to join in? So we're these are on the same cycle, if he got us something between now and tomorrow morning's meeting, or is that separate? Okay.
In the past, the staff is proposing to follow here, very similar to what we did when we got the petition, Gates County. Tax pen, when they did a citizen's petition, we sent it straight to rulemaking, and we can deal with this position. That would be consistent with the way we handle these. If we outright deny them or not take action, there is some consideration to subject to legal challenge on this. There you go. Any questions about that too?
Okay. All right, so next we have water safety rulemaking. I'll go through exhibits H through L, and all of the rules in those exhibits will be recommended for adoption at tomorrow's meeting. So exhibits H1 and H2 are for proposed amendments to 10A or 10F 0308 Clay County. These amendments will extend the no wake zone at the Ho Hum Campground boat ramp, remove an existing no wake zone at McCracken Cove due to lack of necessity, incorporate a marked swim area within a no wake zone at the Clay County Recreation Park, and incorporate a restricted area at Jackrabbit Mountain Swim Area with a swim beach and no wake zone into the administrative code. Whoops. A virtual public hearing was held on February 9th. There were no attendees at that, no comments received during the open public comment period. And so like I said, we will be recommending approval of this at tomorrow's meeting. Any questions on Clay County? All right. Exhibits I1 and I2 are for amendments to the rule for Forsyth, Rockingham, and Stokes counties. The amendments add no wake zones within 50 yards of any public boat ramp, within 50 yards of any bridge crossing on the Blues Lake, and add a no wake zone at the Humphreys Ridge Marina and Grill. We did have a public hearing on February 9th. No comments were received during the open public comment period. Are there any questions on this one? All right. Exhibits J1 and J2 are for proposed amendments to Mecklenburg and Gaston counties. This amendment was requested by the Lake Wylie Marine Commission, and it's to add a no wake zone to Lake Wylie shore to shore in Withers Cove. Get to them there. Shore to shore in Withers Cove for the Mecklenburg Charlotte Fire Department and Police Department Boathouse. We had a public hearing. No comments were received during the comment period. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. Exhibits K1 and K2 are for Perquimans County. The proposed amendments to this rule extend the no wake zone at the Hertford S-shaped bridge on the Perquimans River, mitigate hazards to boat safety. Had a public hearing. No comments were received during the comment period. Any questions on Perquimans County? All right. And finally, exhibits L1 and L2 are for adoption of a new rule. This will be for the city of Roxborough. This rule was requested by the city and will create a no wake zone in the waters of Lake Roxborough, which is a drinking supply lake in Caswell and Person counties, to mitigate hazards to boater safety. There's the map for that one. The public hearing was held on February 9th, and no comments were received during the open comment period for this one either. Any questions? Okay, so that concludes permanent rule adoption for no wake zones that I'll request approval of at tomorrow's meeting. The last thing I have for water safety rulemaking is a temporary amendment to the Brunswick County rule, which is in Exhibit M. The temporary amendment was requested by the town of Sunset Beach for continuation of a dredging project. There's currently a no wake zone in place that covered phase 1 of the dredging project, but there is a moratorium on dredging from April 1st through November 1st, and the current temporary no wake zone will expire before then. So they would like another temporary no wake zone to cover phase 2 of this dredging project. And this one's a little bit different from the temporary no wake zone that's in place right now, but this will include part of the navigation channel, the feeder channel, Four Finger channels, canals, and the bay area. So at tomorrow's meeting, staff will request approval to notice the temporary amendment, open the comment period, and hold one public hearing. Are there any questions on this one? All right. Last rule item. So as you're all aware, the executive director invoked emergency powers for CWD management on April 11th in response to the most recent detections. We're obviously not in a deer season right now, but our rules cover prohibited activities year round. The temporary rules that were in place for the last season expired on April 11th. And so those emergency powers became effective today. They are going to be used to bridge the gap between the old temporary rules and the new temporary rules. So you all voted to notice new temporary rules on March 31st. We just had a hearing yesterday. It was fairly well attended. It was a virtual hearing. So the comment period for those temporary rules runs through the 28th, I believe. You'll vote to adopt sometime before June 8th, and those will be effective on July 1st. We also have 2 permanent rules that will come to you at your July meeting. The definition rule, which is 10B0501, and then the surveillance areas rule, which is 10B0503. Those are identical to the temporary rules that are noticed right now. So I don't have those for you because they look the same as what's out there. We do have an approved fiscal note for those. So you all will vote to notice the permanent rules at your July meeting. We also have in our agency bill language for proclamation authority that would eliminate the need for several of the temporary rules. So the ones that set up the surveillance areas and the ones that regulate sampling requirements. So if we get that proclamation authority, we wouldn't need those temporary rules that we have in place now. That would replace, the proclamation authority would replace that. Because we don't ever know when we'll get the agency bill in place or what will happen to that, because it could change between now and then. We do have rules in place in case the proclamation authority does not come through. So we will be able to manage CWD with what we need in rule through the upcoming season. And that's all I have. Are there any questions on that one?
Which means we could eliminate having to go to the governor and state vet, right?
Yes.
We do all that stuff in-house.
Yeah, you wouldn't need to
And
use.
cut out a
emergency
lot of
powers.
red tape.
Yeah.
That's the proclamation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what that language in House Bill 192 does.
Yep.
And Kerry, I hate to put you on the spot, but I will. And you may know that. Obviously, we're past 30 days into the legislature.
Mhm.
Any 10 letter rule, any of that stuff? has
No,
been-
so all of our rules that were over there were released. There were
Okay.
no bills introduced, so all the fish rules came back to us. As is, I think there were 48 of them, maybe. Ish. Goose Creek came back, so that rule's in place now. There's one other one that I can't remember, but anyhow.
They all
bear
came,
sanctuaries.
yeah, and
bear
they all,
management areas.
and they all came in, Bear Sanctuary, whole 9 yards
Mhm.
has now been adopted officially.
Yes, they are back in the agency's
Yep,
possession.
I got you.
Yep.
That's a process, y'all. It's just,
Yes.
and you've done a great job navigating it, but you know, it is what it is. Yes, sir, Mr. Seegers. I know you got something you want to
Well,
say.
I just, again,
I
I'm
didn't mean to
gonna-
poke the bear,
I'm
but go right ahead.
I'm gonna follow your lead. I mean, a lot of us paint a lot of things with a very broad brush. Kerry unfortunately has the responsibility of getting this exactly right.
Yep.
I mean, every comma.
Yep.
Everything, even down to the sequencing of how this stuff works. And I mean, it is tedious and meticulous work. And I think she does an outstanding job. And actually, for those of you who don't know, I'm the chairman of that committee in name only. So there's the workhorse right there. I mean, she called me up and she says, we got a meeting. I said, is everything good? She said, yep. I said, okay, we're adjourned. That's pretty much the way it works. Is that not true?
Yeah, that's pretty much how.
Just want to let y'all know how hard I was working on your behalf. No, in all seriousness, thank you very much,
Thank you.
because it is very meticulous and tedious work.
That's all I have.
Okay. We got one add-on. I think a couple commissioners have asked about the update on the striped bass, where we ended up there in the Roanoke. Christian, if you would give a brief presentation on that, please.
Yes, sir. Glad to. So just a quick reminder of the season that was put together or put in place through proclamation earlier this year. So we had 6 total harvest days that were scheduled, and they're scheduled for the entire river. The first 4 were this past weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So 4 have already happened. And the final 2 are this coming weekend, this coming Saturday and Sunday. And as far as creel size and creel limits, we did reduce it to 1 fish per day, if you remember, and we maintained the size limits of an 18-inch minimum with no fish between 22 and 27. With all that in place, over the 4 harvest days, which were over this past weekend, the preliminary estimate is a total of 5,533 pounds. Our total allowable landings or quota is 12,804 pounds. So that leaves us a remaining quota of 7,271 pounds. So it's highly unlikely, near impossible, I think, I would say, that we would exceed that quota within the next 2 harvest days. So our intention is to continue with the season as it was set up in proclamation. And so harvest will be open Saturday and Sunday, and that will be our harvest season for 2023. Just to give you a couple of very quick observations that kind of explain where we are with that number. The reduction to 1 fish, that definitely made a significant difference in what was harvested. During the creel, there has not been any observation of a fish greater than 27 that has been caught or harvested this year. There was a report with a picture from prior to the harvest season of a 33-inch fish caught, but that's at this point, that's about all we've heard about as far as bigger fish. There have been very few fish caught within the slot, so that's 22 to 27 inches. Most of the fish that are being caught, and of course the ones that are being harvested, are in the 21 to 22 inch range. So there's a few fish out there, but they're smaller. And the larger females haven't arrived yet. We expect that'll happen in the next week or 2. But that's kind of where we are on the Roanoke at this point. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Questions? Brad?
Any indication that people with only being able to collect 1 fish, that they're releasing a lot, hoping for a bigger one later that they may get in the last 2 days?
Not, well, it's 1 fish per day. So, but folks could be, trying to high grade, if you will. But honestly, the reports from most folks are they're not catching a lot of fish. I mean, they're working to get their 1 fish, basically. There's some of the guides and all that report higher numbers, but your average fishermen coming out are not, it's not like they're loading the boat and only keeping 1. I mean, they're not having the banner days like we were having even 4 or 5 years ago.
When will we start stocking?
So the stocking, so that will come June, basically. Those fish will be stocked as phase 1, so there'll be smaller fingerlings, and that's typically in the June timeframe.
Any further questions?
One question.
Go ahead.
Christian, so the Habitat Foundation Bass Pro $500,000 project to clean up culverts and habitat, is Brian, is that underway? Is that, where were we with that?
Yeah, it's underway. You guys.
Yeah, they're in the process of getting designs all set up on the bridge building project and getting all that permitting worked out so they can start that project here really soon.
It's a
But
big deal.
underway.
I'm sorry, what's the total striped bass, commercial and recreational fishing quota for the year?
Okay, so the
Weight
total,
wise,
actually, I wrote it down, so I could, so total, it is 51,216 is the total
Commercial
level.
and
That's
and
everything.
recreation.
And then it's split 50-50.
Right.
So the commercial gets 26,608. And all of that occurs, basically in the Albemarle Sound. And they closed their season just below the quota, so they didn't quite harvest their quota. And then the Albemarle Sound Recreation gets 12,804. They had a really good spring season, but they closed, they had a little bit left, but I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. And then, of course, we get 12,804 pounds.
Now, let me put that in perspective for everybody. The first time I was the chairman of the fisheries division, this is Bob Curry days. Recreation and commercial was 860,000 pounds.
Wow.
So that's where we are today.
Yeah, our current total allowable landings is lower than it's been, basically, even if you go all the way back to the late 90s when the fishery reopened. So I think it was for just the Roanoke at that point, I think it was 29,000 pounds. if I remember.
You should, Wes not staying on the fishery. Sure.
That's my fault.
So where's that reduction, was it contributed to?
We don't need to answer that question.
Overfished.
Overfishing. We'll let it go.
Yeah, there is overfishing, but the something that's really messed us up the last 6 years is the lack of recruitment. And we're still trying to work through that, but there's been a combination of lack of recruitment, but truth be told, we've been harvesting.
What does lack of recruitment mean?
So we're not getting the small fish coming back. They're reproducing, but the fish don't show back up when they're 3-4 years old. And so some of that's due to weather and rain at inopportune times during the season that results in mortality. But we're just not seeing high levels of those smaller fish coming back into the population. And then you combine that with the fact that we've been fishing commercial and some recreational, been fishing at a higher rate than we probably should have under those circumstances. Those two combined has put us in this predicament.
Mr. Berry? We're gonna continue to stock, or is this just year to year?
So we've got a current plan for 3 years to see if we're going to be able to contribute, if that's going to make a difference. To be very honest, we're very hopeful that the right conditions happen, we can get a good natural year class come through. And, we've shown that with a good natural year class, that alone can sustain the fishery for 8, 9, 10 years. So I think there's a real opportunity that could rebound fairly quickly. The problem is when you don't have a good year class for 6, 7 years, you have to be very careful with what you harvest. And so that's where those two intersect and get you in trouble.
Dave, do you have a question?
I don't back.
Okay. All right. Are you through? Any other questions?
Done,
on
unless
this order?
there's other
'Cause I don't know where David's gonna go, but we'll figure it out. But
Put somebody on the spot.
go right ahead.
Yeah, Brad. Could you give us just a rundown on our last CWD and kind of, what's going on? I don't know if everybody's heard, the last one was the COT. Wilson and Wilkes and whatnot. I don't know if everybody saw that. And my question, I know last year we had people on definition permits, or we have definition permits out there right now, people still hunting.
They shoot deer on depredation permits. Very, very important, very important. Yes, we got most of our depredation permits issued in the surveillance areas have a requirement for them to submit the heads to us. We picked up a roadkill positive, just opportunistic. One of our staff actually picked it up in Wilkes County, which turned Wilkes County into a primary county. I will reiterate, if you want to go online and look at and click the No CWD page, the new maps are on there. With what will be the primary and the secondary counties are on the No CWD part of our website. Yesterday, we had the public hearing yesterday. I'll not relive that. But there was a lot of concern from folks, a lot of good attendance for a virtual meeting. So a lot of people are very interested in these. We do have, what's the date? The 16th? May 16th is the date set up for our first public forum down in Cumberland County. So we've got that set up and Carolina Outdoors will broadcast that over Facebook Live for us. So there were a lot of questions yesterday that I tried to help folks come to that meeting because we can explore this more than during a public meeting. So pretty much we've got everything set. The coastal folks are working hard to get things lined up for sampling. Mandatory sampling periods. We're going to do 2-week mandatory sampling periods, both in the primary and secondary this year, which we learning off of last year. Up in the Northwest, it's going to be Thanksgiving week and the week after, because that's our peak harvest weeks. Down in the Southeast, it's going to be the week before Thanksgiving. That tends to be our high peak harvest there.
So as of right now, we've got 9 positive. But those,
All 2 does, all the rest bucks. The one doe, Wilkes County was a doe. She was a roadkill doe, and then the second one that was shot on a depredation permit in Yadkin was a doe. All the rest of them have been bucks, and all but one came through taxidermist.
Certified health cooperative.
Certified health cooperative or processors. We got one from a freezer drop, I think. Of course, we got two mobile coolers ordered, 2 more mobile coolers ordered. Working on getting freezers ordered if they're not already ordered. Working on it today for the new zone.
It's a secondary.
Trying to get all that stuff lined up and taken care of.
Anticipate a lot more voluntary testing on the counties.
I've been.
Not more, I know that. Everything that touches it.
About.
Yep. We're here now.
I was amazed at how
Yeah.
many were really concerned about that, that aren't even close to a surveillance area.
Well,
That are concerned about.
I think the Cumberland County positive sort of woke everybody up, you know, oh, we're not that far away, and all of a sudden we've got one down there. And I think we will continue to see, that's one of the reasons we think we can do the mandatory for a 2-week period. That'll help a little bit with got 2 zones now with staff time and that kind of thing. Plus, I think we're just gonna get continuous voluntary. People are gonna want the deer tested. Some people don't care, and that's fine. It's up to them, but except for during the mandatory period. But I think that's the reason we're anticipating a lot more. I think people are tuned in and they just want to get deer tested.
Have y'all figured out how you got that big a jump?
I think it's 2 separate. I mean, personally, I don't know this for a fact. We don't know. We may, as much as we've sampled across the Piedmont between the 2, and we got that up there where it's at, and then one over here, I think we're dealing with. We'll know more at the end of this fall. If it goes across the Piedmont that way from Cumberland County, right? We do think that the one in the Northwest is definitely more than likely tied to the Southwest Virginia. That's a clump over there.
A migration deal.
Well, but the one in Virginia though was so far up north originally before they found the one in the south that it's kind of a very similar situation, isn't it? That when they had CWD in Northern Virginia and then all of a sudden it was 30 miles from our border. And then the same thing here, we had this cluster in D7 and then all of a sudden one showed up in Cumberland, which is exactly what happened in Virginia.
Yeah, it's exactly the same scenario. The ones that showed up around Blacksburg, you know, are they related to the ones in Northern Virginia? Did somebody kill a deer up there and take it down there? Possibly. Did it come from somewhere else? Possibly. We'll never really know. Did it come from North Carolina and move up into Virginia? And we're still examining
I
that.
came from Virginia.
We're still blaming Virginia. We did meet as another aside, with staff met, we went up 2 weeks ago. and met with Virginia staff. We had a meeting up there and kind of got together and they've been dealing with it a lot longer. Plus, we're also dealing with this shared one down here. So we're working. They got how many more positives? Do you remember?
They're at 3 in that southwest.
Yeah, they're up at 3. They basically just continue to use opening day of deer season plus taxidermists. We're still trying to figure out where ours is. That's been their protocol, so that's how they're doing it, but we'll continue to do the same thing. The taxidermist, that approach is turning out to be a really good approach for sort of finding it where you don't know it's at. So, but I don't know that the two are related. We'll never know for sure how it got here, how it got there. I'm hoping to blame Virginia and South Carolina. Up from South Carolina down to Virginia, and then we'll just have to deal with it. But I don't think they're connected. We sampled a lot of deer across that northern Piedmont, across the Piedmont range. We, the furthest over we got was Surrey County, Stokes. Which one's which?
Stokes.
Yeah, Stokes.
If all our samples been tested now.
Pretty much. We never have all of our samples tested because we get random roadkills and different things like that. But yeah, all of our stuff from last hunting season's done, processed, and all of that. So we're
It's a good sign.
getting ready to, we'll start up now with probably depredation shoots, those kind of things.
That's a good question. How many, on the average, how many depredation deer tags do we issue a year? Roughly.
I don't even. What do you think, Evan?
Well,
The enforcement.
they're not really tags.
Yeah, they're not really
permits with
Yeah.
application and it
Probably-
used to be, I want to say it was like 12 or 16,000 or something.
Yeah.
That's the total number.
Yeah.
Total harvest was like
Those are the totals, we're not sure. Holy cow.
I mean,
the harvest.
we can go look at pull all our definition records, and it varies greatly by where you're at and that kind of thing. And types of depredation, we have depredation permits from deer eating my pansies to deer in my cornfield, so it's a big difference, but most of these that are in the agriculture areas, we're working cooperatively and they've been help us with that. That's how we found the other one. Yeah.
Bottom line is those depredation kills are far less than.
Oh, yeah, way.
Significant. Give somebody. Definition from. Out of season.
In general, we typically don't allow that on depredation permits, but we've had a few scenarios where we have the ability to make that a conditional permit. And there very well may be some places where we may have to write depredation permits, that technique to get the deer where they need to be shot. Not there yet. We don't, it's not illegal to allow them to shoot. We just typically don't let them use corn or if they're depredating, you got to shoot them. You can't bait
I
it.
didn't know if we were issuing these permits because we wanted those deer killed.
Well, they're killing them. Most of those are ag fields now, but if we ever get into a scenario or situation where it gets into more populated areas and we need to put deer in a certain place for people to shoot them, doing damage, we've got the ability to make that a condition.
Brad, quick question. So where are we compared to when Virginia got it? How many months went by? What's our, give me a projection here. What's it look like? Are we gonna be inundated and we're gonna be all over the state in a year, 2 years? We're just slowing it down. How quick's it gonna go?
Well, so I think where we are right now is trying to figure out the answer to that question.
Yeah, we don't
We don't know where it's at.
So go back to
So-
Virginia. What happened to Virginia? Is it statewide in Virginia?
Oh, no, but it is slowly expanding. Their highest density is still up in the northwestern part of the state, but it's expanded across northern Virginia now. This new one is a separate one. They added 2 new counties last season. They've got an extra 2 new counties. I think that's right, isn't it? For one. So depending on when it got here, which we don't know yet. I mean, right now up there in the northwest, we know we've got it from Wilkes County, Stokes County. But we haven't seen it further south from those, and right along that Yadkin County line right there. Yeah. We don't have a clue down east. We got 1 deer down there, so pick a spot. We don't know where it's at down there. Well, in talking with other wildlife chiefs in other states and stuff, I mean, basically they say it's gonna take us 3 to 5 years to really figure out what we're dealing with. You know, and that's how long it's gonna take. It's clearly been up there in the Northwest for a while. I mean, we have 8 positives and, you know,
And Virginia's doing about the same thing we're doing, or we're doing about the same thing in Virginia on whether we're allowing baiting, not allowing it, harvest and all.
Well, Virginia's never allowed baiting, period. So, but they do have feeding restrictions and they have some really kind of weird feeding restrictions that you can't feed after a certain date, but you can feed before that. And ours is a little more clear cut. You just can't feed except for during the hunting season. So our baiting and hunting is more consistent with what Arkansas is doing. South Carolina doesn't have it yet, so they don't have any restrictions. Tennessee didn't have baiting. Virginia doesn't have baiting, so we're kind of looking at some of the other states like Arkansas and some places that allow baiting. And so
Thank you.
following that model.
Well, I think to follow up, Virginia's not being anywhere near aggressive with the testing that we do. So there's no way in the world to really answer that question about Virginia to North Carolina, because the baseline is they're not doing the amount of testing we're doing. We're thousands more than they are. Just so they may be spread and they're not catching it where I think have got a better handle on where it's going and where it'll go, because it's just difference in their approach.
Good enough.
Is it fair to say we probably are doing more testing than anybody else really right now, trying to get
That
a
I can't
handle?
answer that. I don't know.
Or as much as anybody?
Tennessee did more.
We're up there. I
Okay.
think Tennessee tested, how many? 20,000.
Yeah, so
20,000
I think us in
tested.
Tennessee are the leaders in testing, aren't we?
Yeah, they're looking hard trying to, you know, they're clearly in Tennessee, it was way out the barn. I mean, they've got CWD way further than they ever thought they did. I mean, they found it down at the southern line. They thought Alabama or Mississippi gave it to them, which was not the case. And we've really ramped ours up.
Yep. Good.
Right now, we just want to find it.
Landon,
Once we find it, we know. we'll know that.
Landon, you got a question?
Yes, it's fair to say as we continue and we'll continue to get updates in the future meetings. Is there, and I guess it's too new, are there any studies? Cause it's like, again, yeah, we're testing, us in Tennessee are testing a lot more. Is it, you know, it's newer here. Some of these states where it's more mature, I mean, you got animals dying of it. Are we there yet? Or is it just, okay, we're picking them off before they're, you know, get killed by the, I guess, disease or whatever? I know, have there been any studies, or is it just kind of every state's for themselves and you gotta?
And I might like toss that.
Any models,
There's
future
a
modeling?
lot of work going on, and we're getting ready next May. We're sending Mariah and Sarah Vandenberg to the CWD symposium, which is, you know, the
Okay,
cutting
cool.
edge, the new stuff. We look, you know, Mariah's talking constantly with the other deer biologists and the way they're doing it. A lot of, you know, we have the benefit of seeing how everybody else did it, and we don't do that, we'll do this. And so you got places where it's been in Wisconsin for 30 years almost. Clearly it's been in Tennessee for that long too, for it to be as spread out as where it's at now. They just hadn't started managing it yet, but
I'm thinking like future modeling or any, I don't know, it's just.
Some modeling work.
Okay.
We're actually cooperating right now, just as an FYI, with Mississippi State, and they're doing work sampling scrapes and licking branches because they're actually finding that they can detect prions in scrapes.
Cause you,
So that may be another way to sample.
because I don't necessarily put a lot into modeling, but you do that, you can start seeing, hey, when are, you know, sales gonna be affected, licenses, stuff like, you know,
Right.
so just might be a good indicator of the future.
Lots of different modeling work going on with it, and newer and better input into the model.
Yep.
Because we know a lot more today about CWD than we did when this thing started 20 some years ago. But there's still a lot we don't know.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I'll just add that meeting we had with our colleagues in Virginia a couple of weeks ago, I was encouraged by the fact that even in Northern Virginia, where they have been endemic for quite a while, they do see some of those symptomatic animals. They've taken some steps. Can't get into details now. They actually still have a very strong deer hunting culture.
Nice.
down there. Those deer hunting is still very popular. I found that pretty encouraging. To hear that message.
Any further questions? Nope. Housekeeping before we leave. We made reservations tonight at Casa Carbone. It's a Italian restaurant out on Glenwood Avenue, 1619 Glen. They've got a private dining room. So we'll meet at the hotel at 6 o'clock for those who want to go. And we'll go to dinner there tonight. That's all I have. Any further questions?
Meeting adjourned.
Okay.